Good evening. Welcome to the Zoning Board of Appeals meeting for April 22nd, 2020. In accordance with the governor's order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20, relating to the 2020 novel coronavirus outbreak emergency, the April 22nd, 2020, 7 o'clock public meeting of the Norfolk Zoning Board of Appeals shall be physically held to avoid group congregation. Alternative public access to this meeting shall be made utilizing the Zoom virtual meeting software for remote access. This software will allow users to view the meeting and send a comment or question to the chair via the raise your hand function. The meeting will be recorded for future rebroadcast by Norfolk Community Television. If you haven't already been admitted to the meeting, please sign in using your first and last name so that our two administrators, Amy Brady and Richard McCarthy, can let you in. We would like you, if you could, use the raise your hand function during this meeting, but if for some reason you are not recognized, certainly speak up. Tonight we'll be continuing two public hearings, 194 Main Street Comprehensive Permit and the 144 Secon Street Comprehensive Permit. At this time, I'm going to turn over the meeting to Vice Chair Michael Kaliza. I will recuse myself and he will begin the 194 Main Street Comprehensive Permit. Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
To get started tonight, I understand we've had some new information come in this week. Mike O'Shaughnessy, if you want to kick this off and give us an update, I think that's a good place to start.
Okay. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, and all the members of the Norfolk Zoning Board of Appeals. As you may recall, we had met about 3 weeks ago to discuss this project, and there was three main issues that had been discussed that we needed to follow up on. One was traffic, one was civil, and the last component was architectural. So I think I'd like to, Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind, just attack these in order and just go through them quickly, and then we can get to the new information. So after we last met, there was some discussion regarding supplementing our traffic information. Our traffic engineer, Bill Scully, had pulled all of his information together that was requested at the last meeting. We had provided it to the board, who subsequently sent it to Beta. Beta's reviewed it, and based on their letter, I think we've resolved all of the traffic issues and concerns. So I think we're good with respect to traffic. The next issue that we discussed was civil and the stormwater. After we had last met, Jamie from Zenith Engineering had provided the basic stormwater analysis that we provided to you folks and to Beta. And Beta has conducted a high-level review. And I don't want to speak for Beta, but preliminarily, based on the information that we've given to them, and our past evaluation of the site, I think we've satisfied Beta that the site will work as far as a civil engineering perspective goes. With respect to today's events, we had provided to the board, to the fire chief yesterday, a turning template plan. We thought we were okay with it. He didn't like it. We scrambled this afternoon to make some adjustments to the plan. Where we effectively slid one of the buildings that was adjacent to the detention basin. We pulled it south a little bit, and we created another turnaround area. So if the fire chief needed to, he could pull in and back his truck out and turn around and go through the site pretty easily. We had received comments this afternoon from both the fire chief and police chief, and it looks like they are both satisfied to our revision. Lastly, with respect to the architectural drawings, this was reviewed by Glenn, I'm going to butcher his last name and I apologize, Fantuccio, and he and Rich had provided us some commentary last week. Greg Sarunian, the applicant's architect, and Glenn had spoken yesterday, and we had filed some revised changes to the board this morning. I believe Glenn has reviewed them, but he's sick and can't participate tonight. But I think what I'd like to do, Mr. Chairman, is have Greg, if he's there, kind of go through the discussion he had with Glenn and present the revised changes to the board that was made in response to both Rich's comments and Glenn's comments.
Okay, thank you. Let's just back up for a bit on the traffic. Bill McGrath, you reviewed the new traffic information to the best. At this point, are we in good shape on all the information that we've requested to the best of your knowledge?
Yeah, so we had been asked to look at a couple of things. One was site distance and the site triangle coming out of the proposed driveway, as well as level of service at the proposed driveway. So we did review the information that Bill Scully provided, and I think we're satisfied. The site triangle is all contained either within the applicant's property or within the public right-of-way. So there's control over that as far as maintaining a clear site triangle. And the operations at the driveway are satisfactory. Very little queuing, excuse me, within the driveway, and really very little impact to Main Street. So I think at this point we're satisfied with the traffic analysis.
Okay, thank you. Are there any remaining issues that you can see?
Not on the traffic side.
Okay.
On the
All right.
the
Fair
civil
enough. What
stormwater.
about civil engineering? What's your analysis of the civil engineering? Are we at a point now where we can have enough information to begin the waiver process?
Yeah, I think so. So as Mike mentioned, we did look at sort of a high-level review of the stormwater management plan, just to make sure it looked feasible, which we think it does. As we discussed at the last meeting, there's still final design work and detailing that has to be done and should be reviewed, but at this point it all looks workable and feasible, so we think that will all work.
All right, and I want to come back to that in a second. In terms of the architecture, Glenn's not available tonight. I did look at his letter. Can you comment on that? It seemed to be a little light on details. And is Glenn, I know he's out sick, but is he planning to do a more detailed analysis for us and for you to peer review?
Yeah, so Glenn did look at the initial submission and looked at it in relation both to his architectural opinions and experience, as well as the town center design guidelines. And he had some comments. I think he was looking for a little more relief on the front of the buildings in terms of some porches, things like that. He also had some comments about making sure that the exterior in particular was using quality materials in keeping with the guidelines. I think overall he felt that the layout and the architectural design was good. I know that he and Greg did have some conversations yesterday, and there was some additional information submitted. Glenn did have an opportunity to take a quick look at that today. He wasn't feeling all that great, I guess, but we did have a conversation, and he was generally happy with what he saw. But again, I think similar to the site design, there's some final detailing that needs to happen, which I think can happen as part of the final design review and approval process. But in general, I think Glenn's opinion is that the layout is good. The building design looks good. The materials, for the most part, I think he was satisfied with. I think he still had some concerns about some of the outside railings and decking and things like that.
All right. Can we get some, why don't we push that off until the next meeting, get some more detail from Glenn, a more detailed report for our next meeting. At this point, Dan, do you want to weigh in on the traffic, civil engineering, or architecture? Dan Hill?
Yeah, sure. I reviewed the traffic memos as well as the response from Beta, and I think Bill Scully did a nice job of responding to what we asked him to do. We do have the site triangles shown on a plan, which is exactly what we need to document that there is an available site distance. There was an anomaly in Bill's report. He said that there was adequate site distance for 30-mile-an-hour speed, but as Beta correctly noted, the speed data indicates that the 85th percentile speed is closer to 40 miles per hour. But even at 40 miles per hour, it appears that they have the adequate available site distance in both directions. So I'm personally satisfied that that's been addressed for traffic. In terms of on-site circulation, I mean, maybe we'll get to that when we get to the fire chief's comments. But I think those issues have been addressed as well. But I guess we'll wait until we talk about the fire chief's comments. With respect to architecture, yeah, I think the board is expecting a more detailed analysis of how the project conforms or doesn't conform to the 10 design principles for the Norfolk Town Center. The board received an analysis from the developer's attorney, and so I thought that we had requested that Glenn review that and provide his own opinion. So I would like to see that happen for the next meeting, so we can make sure that we've covered those bases. And I did review the revised plans that came in this afternoon, I believe, which Mike O'Shaughnessy had summarized the changes. There were 6 changes. I don't know if Mike wants to go through those or not, but they did seem to address the comments that were made by Glenn. And I don't know what Rich's comments were, but the only question I had actually on Mike's email from 11:50 this morning was that storage sheds were added to the back of building 7. And I'm just wondering, like, why was that done? Who asked for it? And why are storage sheds being added to one building?
Mr. Chairman, can I speak to that and maybe bring?
Yes, go right ahead.
Yeah. Can you give me the screen so I can bring the drawings up? Still can't do it. So while I'm waiting, so the storage sheds were added, then that was one of the comments that Rich had on his list. He was questioning storage of people's personal effects. And that one particular building, 7, which is towards the back near the retention basin, because of some setback distances to septic systems, can't have a basement. So they don't have a garage and they don't have a basement. So having a spot so they could store bicycles, so any outdoor lawn furniture for their decks. So it sort of takes up the same amount of space that a bulkhead would have on the other buildings. They had bigger patios compared to the people who have bulkheads. So it's sort of a trade-off. They get a storage area instead of a bulkhead to access the basement. Oh, here we go.
Okay,
Amy, can you get those drawings up? Are you working on that?
I'm bringing them up right now.
Oh, you are? Okay. Thank you, Greg.
Can you see them?
No, we don't see him, Greg. Does it look like you have sharing ability?
It says it's failed to start. Let me try again. No, it's saying failed to start.
These are not drawings that we already have?
Yeah, so they were the ones that Mike emailed this morning.
Oh, then we probably have them. We could let Rich share them.
Rich, they would have been the plans that were emailed over about noontime today.
Okay. Amy, did you put them in the folder or
They
is
should be in the architectural folder. Anything I got today, I think I put in there.
Okay.
Is this the new townhouse plan?
Yes,
Okay. Yeah, the new townhouse plan, Rich, it should be in there.
should have a date of next to it, today's date.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you maybe just slide down a little bit. There we go.
Greg,
Yeah,
up where it says you're viewing Richard McCarthy's screen, do you have view options next to that?
yeah,
And if you click on the drop down, the third one down says annotate, hopefully.
yeah, there it is.
And then you should have a toolbox of different ways for you to annotate.
Yeah,
Let's see if that works.
okay.
Sometimes there's a delay. It might work with a delay.
So people see the mouse moving.
No, you should actually be able to like write on it.
Yeah,
This hasn't, we've tried it before and there have been troubles with delays, but I figured it was worth a shot.
yeah, here we go. So I just drew a circle out of the example of storage sheds. Can people see what I just circled?
No, but I can see your mouse moving now unless that's Rich.
No.
Yes.
Here.
It is? Okay. Well, I think Rich might just have to point it out for you then. We'll have to get better at this, Rich.
And to Dan's comment, that's what those are right there. Yes, just in this one particular building.
Excellent.
So the other things that this plan addresses was one of the comments that Rich had was maybe some screening on the far left side of the property that abuts the commercial buildings here. So we added a fence from, along that side, not the entire side. We added some additional landscaping in front of the fence. A comment that was shared by both Glenn and Rich was to create the walkway along the units along Main Street to connect with the buildings in the back. As you can see, Rich is doing that right now. And then also having access to Main Street off the end. Now, because of the grades, it's not possible to do all with sidewalks, so it's a combination of some steps and some sidewalks. So those were the items on the site plan that we addressed, other than the turning radiuses haven't been updated on this plan. So if we slide to the exterior building elevations. So right here is good. So one of Glenn's comments was the fact that the way he was reading it, exterior porches were required in order to reinforce the presence on Main Street. We did a little study where we looked at that, and we thought it was too much, and we shared that drawing with Glenn. I also discussed with Glenn that if you read the guidelines, it clearly stated other options such as bay windows, entry porticos, and those are what we were showing. After Glenn and I looked at it together, we both agreed that maybe as you can see here, the third building from the left and the fourth building from the left are the buildings that have a little taller feel to it because of the upper dormers. So there we introduced a full porch, as Glenn had suggested. He had also asked us to do some blow-up elevations, which we did do when we indicated materials. So if we slide down, keep going. Keep going. A couple more. Couple more. I think it's the last sheet. Yeah, here we go. If you your window down a little bit on this. So we listed the materials. One of the other things I had pointed out is in the guidelines that, we asked for different materials. He had suggested, and again, he was reading it out of the guideline, stone and brick. I didn't think these buildings really worked well with stone and brick, so we used different materials such as lap siding and shingles. It's a very common detail, New England style, and he seemed satisfied with that as well. We also listed the materials, which I had some dialogue with him on that, and he seemed satisfied with that. So I did not talk to him after he saw these, so that if he has additional comments, I have not heard from him on that. I think that was the extent of his comments and Rich's comments that we had addressed.
So can I just ask a question then? Greg, on the first page of this PDF document, which is landscape plan, I guess, landscape lighting site plan.
Yes.
The front of each building is showing a porch. The buildings that face Main Street, the front of each building, there's a porch detail shown, but that seems to conflict with what you just said. So.
Well, no, we're calling a porch versus an entry stoop. So if you look at, it's labeled as a porch, but that's divided with a little, if you look at the elevations, I can kind of show you a little bit better. So
Right.
yeah, well, let's go to the larger one. It'll probably be easier to show you in the larger one. And it's just semantics, whether it's an entry porch or a portico. So for instance, that plan is showing, if you look at the top, if you look at underneath the red roof, the two doors,
Right.
that plan that you see is going from railing to railing, but it does have a little divider in the middle so that, people feel like they have their own entry. We called it a porch. It's a stoop.
Right, but that's not what I'm talking about. If you scroll back up to the elevation plan, Reg, keep going. Right there. So the building on the far left doesn't have that shared porch element that what you're showing on the site plan. So they're not matching up.
That's just a detail that we hadn't updated.
Okay.
But it has the entry porches right next to each other.
Okay, so that's a detail that you would update.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. So Mike, I think that, it'd be good to have Glenn take a look at these changes. These just came in today. I'm sure he hasn't had a chance to look at them. So these changes all seem responsive to the comments. So I would recommend that we have Glenn take a look at it and give us a memo. And if he could address the design principles, 1 through 10, it doesn't have to be lengthy, but if you can just go through them and say this project addresses them in this manner, or you could simply agree or disagree with what Mike O'Shaughnessy had written up.
Good. I think that makes sense. They've made some very good progress, and let's table the rest of the discussion on architecture until Glenn is available for our next meeting. one on the site plan that was up, while we're looking at that, I know the fire chief had some concern about on-site circulation. Can we go back to that? And Chief, if you're still on the call, I'd like to either have Jamie or Greg talk about what the issue was and if it's been resolved. And then Chief, if you can comment on whether you're satisfied with the new design, the new on-site circulation, that would be very, very helpful to the board.
All right. No problem.
So, what was the initial issue, Jamie or Greg? Can you give us an update on that and how it's been
Jamie,
resolved?
do they have your plan?
I don't know if they have the latest one you sent me this afternoon.
I think we do. Let
But
me check. Hold on. a
Yeah.
second.
Amy, can you give me the ability to use the screen and I'll share? I have the PDF on my computer here.
I think that everybody has ability to share now.
Okay, let me see. Actually, yeah. Nope. You
No?
cannot share screen while other participant is sharing.
Oh, that's why, especially Rich, because he's a host. So
I think this is the one, though, isn't
I think only Rich can share.
No,
with
no,
Rich.
that's the
There was one that
There's a new
came
one.
through about 5 o'clock.
later. Yeah, it was later in the afternoon.
it? Oh, here we go.
Yep, that's the one.
That's the one, yeah.
Perfect. So Chief Kinney had pointed out that in the fire code, we exceeded the 150 feet to a dead end for emergency turnaround. And so we've added an emergency turnaround in between, I believe it's building 7 and 11, to accommodate that break to allow him to turn his ladder truck in that area so that we meet the 150-foot dead end rule. You can see in vehicle turning plan views 4 and 5, we show the truck being able to back in and then pull out without an issue. And Chief Kinney and I, we spoke yesterday as well. He had us adjust the size of the ladder truck to conform more with what the town actually is using for a service vehicle. So this has all of those things implemented.
Okay. Chief, are you satisfied with this solution?
Yes, they addressed everything, from angle of approach, angle of departure, and then also, creating or putting in a sufficient turnaround. When I first looked at it, I think I didn't quite get it to scale, and I overlooked that 220 feet along the front going all the way in, and the code does state pretty clearly that the dead end can exceed 150 feet. So that turnaround is perfect. The other added bonus to it is it gives us better access to the rear of both of those blocks of buildings there too. So we possibly could set up our ladder truck using that space as well. If we had to rescue someone off the rear or something like that, it gives us more access, which is great.
Okay. All right, good. I think, Dan, any questions from the board regarding this on-site circulation?
Quick question, Mike.
Evan, go ahead.
I just want to make sure that if we have that turnaround, are you proposing like any no parking signs or like hatching or something like that, just so cars don't park there?
Yes.
Yeah. We'll Jamie, sorry. We'll stripe it or note it as no parking, or we'll do something so people don't park there.
Perfect.
Thank you, Devin. Other comments, members of the board? Dan?
And that area is going to be plowed during snow events, I'm assuming. That's correct?
Yes,
And-
it'll be paved and plowed, yep.
And did you show any snow storage areas on the site? I mean, it looks like you have plenty of room for it, but I think just to be clear, are you going to be plowing snow basically off the end of that stick area now?
Yes, that is correct. There's grass at the end of it, and we will be plowing snow off the end of that area.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Certainly, Mike.
So there was a bunch of comments that was in or recommendations made by Bill McGrath with respect to the design and conditions, if you will, that he wanted to see in the final plans. Again, nothing in there is something that we object to, and we have no issue with addressing those on final design.
What's your point, Mike?
Well, my point is, Mr. Chairman, there was if you look at the Beta's letter with respect to the high-level review, they had made a bunch of recommendations, such as test pits, showing snow removal, adding some additional details regarding, I can't find it in front of me, regarding stormwater management and complying with stormwater management standards. So I think that their comments will apply going forward, and we're comfortable addressing them as part of a final plan, approved plan set. I'd like to push this hearing along. I think we've addressed everything that the board has asked for. It's unfortunate that Glenn can't be here, because I think he could comment and opine that we do meet the guidelines, and I'd like to remind the board that they're just guidelines, but we've done our best to meet them. If the board wants to factor that into their decision, that's fine. But I'm sensing that we're trying to kick this down the road to another meeting. I don't know if that's the board's intent or not, but I think we're close to the point where we should be discussing maybe some conditions to be incorporated into a decision if the board deems fit and proper. That's kind of where I'm coming from right now, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. Well, I think the architecture issue can be resolved very quickly at the next meeting. I don't think it's going to consume much time, but we want to cross some T's and dot some I's regarding that. I don't see any major issues, so I don't think that's going to be a problem. In terms of what we need, and we want to move this along, we want to start with the waivers. I think next meeting we'll be in a position where we can do that, but I want to make sure, Dan, do we have everything that we need at this point to begin that waiver process?
Yeah, no, I think you do. My only general comment on the status of the civil design and the peer review is that I just want to make sure the board is aware of the level of detail that you have currently, and it's not typical. We typically see a far higher level of detail with the civil design of a project at the stage before we close a hearing. So I have to disagree a little bit with Mike on the board's readiness to proceed to a decision. I mean, it's up to the board, of course, how much detail you want to ask for, but just based on past projects, every project that we've done, that I've done with you, we have things like test pit data. This project doesn't have test pit data for the stormwater systems. I don't know if we have it for the wastewater systems. We don't have the design of the wastewater system. We have an envelope, a dashed line as to where this will go, but we don't actually have the details of the septic system itself. We don't have the location of one of the infiltration basins. These are the sort of things that we typically ask for and require for every 40B project, and that we would have peer reviewed. So what Bill McGrath has said in his letter this week was that he thinks this is all feasible based upon what he's seen so far. There's enough room on the site to handle stormwater and to handle wastewater, but a lot of the heavy lifting of review would have to happen after the permit if the board isn't going to require that level of detail now. And that can be okay. My only caution there is that, as I've advised you guys in the past, under Chapter 40B, boards are not allowed to defer and delegate. Actually, it's not just 40B, it's any zoning decision. Zoning boards and planning boards cannot defer and delegate matters of substance to other boards and officials, even to itself after a permit's been issued, after a hearing's been closed. So there is this kind of tension between the desire to expedite a project under 40B and the need to thoroughly evaluate a project before you close a hearing. And so I just caution the board that we can defer perhaps the review of stormwater utilities and wastewater utilities to after the permit's been issued. But you know, if there is a risk that a developer would argue that those kind of post-permit conditions are illegal. So if this applicant is saying to you that I'm okay with post-permit reviews and I'm okay with the board exercising discretion and judgment after the permit's been issued as to whether these utilities are okay, then that's acceptable. But you know, most developers don't like post-permit conditions, and so my general advice is always to get as much information as possible before a hearing is closed, so we can make the most educated decision as possible.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, we have done a number of test pits with the Board of Health out on site in the drainage area and for the septic, but you're correct in the fact that one of the drainage areas does need additional test pits.
Okay. All right, what's the,
Al, we can't hear you.
can you hear me now?
I can't, Al's trying to speak and we can't hear him.
All right. Well, we're trying to get Al online. What's the sense of the board in terms of the level of detail that we need to thoughtfully evaluate the information that we have before us? Why don't we start with Don?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Don, go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Al's not muted. Al, you're not muted. I don't know why it's not. I'm sorry. Is there?
Does he need to turn up his volume?
Volume?
Mr. Chairman?
Should it be your volume, Al? Al, can you hear us?
Mr. Chairman, Al should get his wife back. She's the brains of the operation.
Okay.
If you can't figure that out, I mean, you can also call as well.
Yeah. I don't know if I have his number.
Hey, listen, while we're waiting to get Al back online, why don't we, Devin, go ahead, or Don, I want to get a sense of what the board would like to do in this case.
Don, you want to lead us off?
Go ahead, Devin.
So I think part of me would like to see just some preliminary comments from Glenn. I understand Al has, obviously tried to work very hard with the town to try and come to resolution on all our issues. I want to be fair to all the applicants and try to be as consistent as possible while using our best judgment from project to project. I'm kind of indifferent one way or the other whether we can defer these architectural questions after permit.
I was more interested, Devin, in stormwater and wastewater systems, test pits, that sort of information.
I'm actually not sure you can. I'm not sure you can regulate and make the permit, the applicant fully design a septic system for this permit. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dan.
Yeah, no, I'm not suggesting you fully design it. It's generally what we get at this stage are specifications, what kind of septic system is being proposed, so we know what the size of the leach field would be. We know what the specific components of the septic system would be, so we know where they would go. It would answer questions such as, whether there needs to be a pumping house or pump station. With respect to drainage, they're asking for a waiver from the town's stormwater management bylaw. So that is a significant waiver, which we've granted in the past, but generally when we review those, we want to know what the system looks like, and we want to make sure that the system's going to work. So that's why we would ask for, and again, it's not fully engineered. What we typically get at this stage is preliminary engineered plans that provide basic information like groundwater elevations. So if we don't have that, we don't have the sizing of at least the detention ponds, then we don't have a lot to go with. And I'm just saying there's a spectrum. There's sketch plans on napkins, and then there's fully engineered plans. And what we typically ask for is something in between. And this is not a sketch plan. I'm not suggesting that, but it's more towards that end of the spectrum than we're used to seeing.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, the drainage design that we had for the last project on this site coming into today, we have the groundwater elevation data, the infiltration data, all on the plans. The basin bottom itself has not changed. Neither is the loading rate on it. So, and we do have the test pit information, which the board has from the previous submittals. Dan is correct in the fact that we need to pull it all together for the final. But that stuff has all been looked at, as has the watersheds and the drainage overall. We sent Mr. McGrath and Beta a more detailed drainage design than a napkin or anything like that. It has full HydroCAD done out with showing pre and post flows and a reduction. So we feel good about what we've given on this.
Okay, I was just only going based upon Bill McGrath's memo, which seemed to indicate that we didn't have a lot of those details. So maybe there's a disconnect between what Jamie is saying and what Bill's memo says, but I didn't think that Bill was actually opining on whether we had enough that kind of information, but maybe he can clarify that.
Bill, you want to weigh in? Bill McGrath?
Yes. Yeah. Sorry, I was on mute. I lost the audio a little bit. Jamie, what were you saying?
I was saying that to Dan's comment, we've done some test pits. We have water table elevations in relation to the drainage basin. On the previous drainage design, we'd kind of worked through those issues. So it's not that we're just guesstimating. We actually have solid groundwater elevations and things like that. It's just a matter of finalizing the fine details. But in this case, where we've already done it and been through the full peer review, we're just enlarging the size of the basin a bit and modifying things for the new layout. This is a lot further along than one would think.
Yeah.
Jamie, would the same thing apply as far as the septic design goes too, since we already fully designed it and did it one time for the large building?
Not as much for the septic as it does for the drainage. The drainage is much further along than the septic. So the septic, again, we've designed out the leaching field size, which is the boxes utilizing stone and pipe trenches. And that being said, we haven't placed tanks for the septic system yet. And we would do that. We want to make sure that all the components on site stop moving around so that we can finalize that design, because it gets expensive and tedious. But as far as the drainage is concerned, we're very confident with that.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. I think from a stormwater management perspective, we're very confident that the system works. It's very similar to what was designed before in the previous iterations of the plans. So I think the additional detail we'd be looking for would more be invert elevations, rim elevations of structures, maybe a little bit more detail on the septic system, just to make sure that it doesn't conflict with any of the stormwater components, things like that. And I thought the discussion at the last meeting was that we'd be doing a little more peer review with the final design plans, as opposed to what normally we would do is with the final design plan, simply confirm that all the conditions of approval have been addressed. I think in this case, we thought that we would do a little bit more of a technical peer review and try to go through some of the design, sort of final design components.
I think just to clarify what my point was is that, I mean, just for example, for the drainage, issue number 3 in Bill McGrath's letter says the applicant proposes one infiltration basin and one subsurface basin. The infiltration chamber system is not shown on the plans, but its proposed location beneath the driveway is labeled conceptual drainage area. Only one test pit has been conducted within basin 1P, while no test pits have done for the other stormwater basin. So my point is that usually at this stage, we would have that information. We would also have pipe sizing and invert elevations. We don't have that. So that's what I'm referring to, is that we don't have the kind of next level of detail that we typically would have in reviewing a project. And I think what Jamie is saying is he doesn't want to go to that point until we've got a final design, which is reasonable, but the board needs to decide, do you want the developer to provide now this next level of detail for the drainage system at this stage, or are you comfortable just deferring this review until after the permit's been issued? And in our practice, we have, I think, always reviewed this prior to the hearing being closed, so that this would be an exception that the board would make for this project.
Yeah, I agree, Dan. This is a little bit of a different process. We would have more detail ordinarily. I guess my point only is that we don't see any fatal flaws to making the drainage system and the stormwater management system work based on the information we saw before, which was more detailed in this information. So I would agree we don't have the level of detail, but we're comfortable that the system will work once that detail is added.
Okay, if I don't hear any objections from other members of the board, I think we can move on, and we'll make an exception this time, not requiring all this additional level that we normally would. Bill McGrath seems comfortable with the information that has been provided at this point, and as long as the applicant is aware that after the permit has been granted, we will do a real deep down analysis that's necessary. Will that work? Is everyone comfortable with that?
Then, Mike, that would be like a condition of approval, correct?
What's that, Don?
That would be a part of the conditions of approval, correct? Within the permit?
Direct that to Dan.
Yes, it would be, and that's a good question, Don. And I would like to have the applicant state on the record that he is not going to object to a condition that would say that the project's stormwater and wastewater management systems shall be reviewed after the permit's been issued by the board's civil peer review engineer, and that this project, that this comprehensive permit will be contingent upon that peer review engineer's satisfactory review of those plans.
Okay. That sounds reasonable. And that way,
Yeah, I think we're okay with that.
Mike, for the applicant, is you on the record agreeing to that?
Yeah, we're comfortable with that. I mean, we know we have to satisfy whomever your peer review is going to be. I'm assuming it's going to be Beta again, and we know what we need to provide to satisfy them with respect to stormwater management.
Okay,
good. Can the client confirm that?
I don't think we have. I don't think he can speak yet.
Is he gone right now?
He might be
Yeah,
trying
I
to
don't
get
see
back
him,
in.
Amy.
Yeah, he had logged off and tried coming back in. He tried calling in.
Mr. Chairman, is there any reason we can't go through some of the waivers this evening? I know Bill McGrath from Beta has looked at them briefly, just to keep the process moving.
I don't think that was, I'm not prepared to do that. I haven't had a chance to look at them yet. Dan, were you thinking of doing that tonight? I don't think we were.
I mean, to be honest, I'm not prepared to go through those myself. You know, we have another very large 40B project that was in the pipeline before this one, and
Yes.
that's taken up a lot of my time over the last week, drafting conditions and looking at waivers. So I have not had a chance to go through Bill's comments.
Yeah. Mike, I think that we'll dedicate an entire meeting to review your waivers the next opportunity that we have.
Okay. When do you think the next meeting would be, Mr. Chairman? What's the board's schedule?
Amy, what's it look
right.
like?
So the next meeting is 2 weeks from now, the 6th. We have 2 hearings. We have 112 Myrtle Street and 7 Phillips, followed by 17 Lawrence Street. So then we have May 20th, which is open.
May 20th is open?
Yeah.
Is there any reason we can't go to the 1st or the next meeting date? What I'd like to do, Mr. Chairman, is maybe take some of the burden off of Dan and take a crack at drafting a decision modeled after what he's done in town for other projects. You know, that takes at least some of the administrative work away from him, and it keeps this moving along. Would the board be opposed to that, Dan? It'd be modeled after, I guess, what the Enclave was, the one from this past year.
Oh. That's up to Dan.
We can hear you, Al.
Al, I think we can hear you.
What?
We can hear you, Al. Al, can you hear us? We can hear you. Okay, I guess he can't hear us now.
Mr. Chairman,
Amy, that next meeting date, we have, we have a pretty full agenda, don't we?
On the 6th,
Yes.
we have a variance, the special permits at 7 Phillips Way, and then we have Abbeville.
Okay, so that won't work. Yeah, Mike, the next date is probably the 20th. And to your question to Dan, that's your call on whether you want Mike to start working on that.
No, I appreciate the offer, Mike, and we tried this actually once before with Rockwood, and it didn't actually save me any time because I had to go through the entire decision anyway, and that's not going to be an issue. I've got time to draft the decision. I just drafted the decision for the Secon Street project, so I have plenty of time over the next 2 weeks to draft the conditions and the waiver issues, and then I'll definitely work with you on that. I'm going to send you my draft, and then you can comment on it and go back and forth. So I don't expect there to be any delays with the decision itself. I think scheduling the meeting is going to be the hard part, it sounds like.
Okay, so at the next meeting, we might be able to at least start talking about the decision, going through the waivers and the conditions and all that good stuff. Is that what I'm hearing? Whether it's the 1st or the 20th? Would it be possible to meet on the following week after your next meeting date? If we're doing it by Zoom, I think it works, and you know, it keeps you folks from getting backlogged as well. Would that be possible to maybe meet on the 13th, assuming we're still shut down?
Yeah, I think the 20th will work. You know, to rush it any sooner than that for a week, I don't think a week's enough. You know, I'd rather do it on the 20th, get everything done and try to get everything done that night. And I think the board needs the extra time, Dan needs the extra time. So let's stick with the 20th. Okay. Joe, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Would you make a motion to continue the public hearing until May 20th. Wait, before we do that, I'm sorry, is there anything else that we've failed to talk about tonight? Mike, did you have anything else on your agenda?
I also think, do we have any butter comments or anything tonight from other attendees?
Good point.
It doesn't sound like you have any abutting comments.
Can anybody hear me?
Well,
Yes.
yes, Al, we heard that.
Great. What did I miss? Did you guys discuss the waivers while I was gone? And we moved
They're all done now.
Dan, do you want to?
I'm serious, Mike.
No, we're going to do it on the 20th.
Ask Al.
What's
Rich?
that?
Al, we're going to do the waivers on the 20th.
And did Dan bite the apple back to the core? I thought bits and pieces I heard him taking us back into the direction of doing all the engineering up front again. And I'm trying to.
Al, that's all been resolved. We're good. Everyone's good on that.
No, I'm not good. Could you tell me how it was resolved? I'm paying the bill here, Mike.
So Al, what we talked about is Dan and I are going to work on a decision between now and the next meeting. The board is going to take the opportunity to look at the waivers in some detail. And Jamie and Bill McGrath were comfortable moving forward with the design of the project, and that the stormwater system would be reviewed as part of the final approval package of the plans that we would need to provide to them, basically filling in the missing gaps in the information they're looking for.
Can't hear you again, Al.
Mr. Chair, should we just recap what we have for action items before next meeting?
Yes. Go ahead.
Okay, so
Go ahead.
as Mike just said, I'm going to draft a decision. I'm going to draft conditions in waiver decisions before May 20th. I'm going to circulate those to Mike O'Shaughnessy well ahead of time, so he has a chance to review them and provide comment. We'll get them to the zoning board members in advance of the meeting on May 20th. We will be asking Glenn to provide a follow-up memo to review the changes that were made today with those revised architectural plans, and to just also address the design guidelines so we have a clear understanding of how the project conforms to those guidelines. I don't think we're asking for any other additional materials from the applicant at this stage. I think we have everything we need to make a decision. Anyone have any suggestions on anything I missed?
Mike, are you okay?
Yes.
Can we move on? Okay, good. Joe, would you go ahead and motion to continue the public hearing to May 20th?
I just want to check. There are no comments from other audience members tonight, right? Before we do that? No.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And Amy, what time on the 20th?
7 o'clock?
7 o'clock. Okay. So I make a motion that we move this hearing for 194 Main Street to May 20th at 7 p.m.
Devin has his hand up.
Oh, sorry. Further discussion, Devin?
Dan, didn't we just want to make sure that Al was okay with the condition that the civil could be done post-permit?
I think we can get that commitment from him before May 20th, and I heard a commitment from his attorney, and to me that's as good as gold. So
okay, that's fine.
If between now and then Al comes back and says, no, I don't agree to that, then we have to revisit this issue.
Well, then the engineering would be done beforehand, so.
Right.
Okay. So we have a motion. Do someone second to move the meeting to the 20th?
Do I have a second?
Aye.
All in favor? All in favor? Aye.
Was that unanimous?
Unanimous.
Unanimous.
Yep.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, let's, Mr. Weeder, if you want to step back in, it's all yours.
Thank you very much, Mike. All right, do you want to give everybody about a 1-minute break here to clear out, and then we can have the next public hearing continue with 144 Secon Street?
Good idea.
Okay, so we'll take a 1-minute break and then we'll come back.
Been here today. Okay, good.
And Marie, we didn't know you could sing.
No. Yes, I forgot.
Maybe the selectmen could invite you on to do like the national anthem or something at one of our meetings or something.
I have one of Elvis Costello's songs in my head,
Oh, do
and
you?
that's what it. So,
I forgot about the meeting tonight. I did with all this madness at home, so.
what happened?
Oh, God, homeschooling, work, you name it. But my husband's been doing a good job, but I forgot about the meeting tonight. I did. That's why I'm late.
Well, these things happen.
How you been doing? How are you, Ruben?
Okay.
Hold up with the house?
As well as can be expected.
Isn't it crazy? Isn't it crazy?
Well, not so much here. It's kind of like dead air. I mean, it's nothing going on here.
Bella's the only person enjoying this pandemic. Yeah, you say hi, Marie?
Christopher, did I ever tell you that story?
Which Christopher are you referring
You.
to?
Talking about
Oh.
you. I sent you a text. Did you ever hear that story?
No, but why don't you tell it to me some other time over a cup of coffee? Maybe you want to share a couple of recipes with us or something too tonight, right?
Rich, you're turning red.
Chris, can I just ask a question here? There's somebody in this meeting with only a first name, Jim, and I don't know who it is. There's no picture.
Don't put you there.
Oh, yeah, there it is. That
Jim,
just
can you
came up.
identify yourself? I'm gonna. Well, he can come.
I would just ask him to state his last name.
I have repeatedly. I don't know if he's hearing me. He's logged off and come back on a couple of times. I can remove him from the meeting. I'm just not sure if I have the ability to let him back in after. Oh, well.
Amy, are you the host for this?
I'm at least a co-host.
I see.
Well, I'd say the person not responding, let him come off, boot him off, and let them come back in formally.
I don't know if he's seeing my requests, though. That's the thing.
Yeah, but should acknowledge a direct question at this point. And do you know who the phone number is? Is one person or is one party? It's just...
That I do know. That's Jim Gersha.
Okay, all right, very good.
Yeah.
Oh, he's one of the Seconk 7.
Mrs. Gersha has her hand up. Maybe she knows. I don't know.
Does. Very good.
Hi, guys. It's Deborah Gersha. It's my husband, Jim Gersha, the traffic consultant.
Okay.
He's on as both Jim and his cell phone number?
I think he's logged on with both.
Oh,
Okay.
that's why we're not getting any response from the Jim. Okay.
Okay.
But he can't respond either way.
Uh,
We can't hear him.
No, I know his phone number. I know that's him on the phone number, so. And it looks like he has no microphone on the Jim. So we're good.
Yeah, hi, this is Jim Gersha. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, I'm on Zoom watching you, and then I'm on the phone. So when I logged on to Zoom, it was just Jim. So
Gotcha.
that's who I am.
Excellent. Thank you.
A minute's gone by.
Thank you very much, Anne Marie.
Just saying. It's been.
We're waiting for Dan and we're waiting for Bill McGrath, I think. And I think Don's offline as well. There's Don. Don, you're muted.
Oh. He's eating.
There's Ted.
Now you don't have to watch me eat my dinner.
All right, I think we have everybody on.
Yeah.
All right, we'll continue with the public hearing for 144 Secon Street. But this time I would turn it over to Chris Agostino to introduce his client and himself again and update us. Chris, welcome.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Logged in here with Ted O'Hart, the developer, is also on the line. When we last met regarding this project, we presented what we described as a proposed settlement plan that substantially reduced the density of the proposed development from 84 units down to 44 units, with the intent of coming up with a comprehensive solution to all of the concerns that the board and other town officials and abutters had raised with respect to the project. And at the last hearing, it was our impression that the overall design was, or the design for the 44 unit proposal was well received. And the initial peer review indicated that it did in fact resolve a lot of the concerns that were raised with regard to the more dense development. So with that, the town circulated the 44 unit plan to local officials and other boards. And since then, we received some comments back from the fire department, from the police department, and we also submitted architectural renderings of the proposed single-family homes and the proposed duplex units to the board's peer review consultant, who issued a peer review report regarding the architectural, the proposed architectural drawings for the units. So our impression of all those reports is that the 44 unit plan again is being well received and doesn't raise any new concerns that aren't insurmountable or can't be addressed through conditions in a comprehensive permit.
You are amazing. I'm sorry.
So, sorry. What I was just saying was things that can't be addressed with conditions in a comprehensive permit. So with that, the board commissioned Dan Hill's office to begin proposed conditions of approval that would provide for implementation of the 44 unit plan. We circulated, or Dan was kind enough to circulate a preliminary draft of those comments or proposed conditions that are relevant to the 44 unit plan. We're able to discuss some of those broadly if that's where the evening takes us. But I think given that the town had solicited some comments from local officials, and we have the architectural review back for the proposed units, it probably makes sense to briefly recap the results of those peer review responses and the responses from local officials regarding the revised plan. So with that, I'll turn it back over to the chair, and we can decide which aspect of the responses we'd like to address next.
Okay, thank you, Chris. I think we'll let Bill McGrath run us through the architectural review. I know Glenn Trujecchio is not available, but I think, Bill, you've had conversations with him, and I think he has written a preliminary letter to the board. Bill?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman. Unfortunately, Glenn couldn't be at the meeting tonight. This is Glenn's second review on the architecture, the first on the revised site plan. And I think in general, from a site perspective, he was very happy to see the green area in the middle. Regarding the single family houses, I think he was looking, he felt there was opportunity to provide some side garages and side driveways rather than all the garages being on the front of the houses. I think some of the lots where there's a larger frontage, I think that would probably work well. And then there was one comment, unfortunately, which I really don't have a good feel for. He was a little confused with, I think, one of the architectural plans that was submitted for the duplex units. He couldn't figure out where those were applied on the site. So unfortunately, I don't know the details of that well enough to really comment on it. And that, other than that, I think he was happy with the site as it was laid out and revised.
Okay, thank you. Ted, did you want to respond to that, or Chris? I know I think it was the duplex was what it was, Wooten and something else?
The Liverpool and
Liverpool.
the Bolton. And the idea there was to propose an alternative schematic design that could be listed in the permit as acceptable units as an alternative. And I think maybe we can craft a condition that would describe how it would be one or the other, so that you don't have a traditional classic design next to a design that, as Glenn described, is incongruent. So I think we can, the idea was it would give us an alternative, but clearly we don't want one alternative from one schematic design directly next to one alternative from another. So I think if we just lump them together and say that we'll do this grouping or that grouping with respect to the duplexes, then that should resolve that concern. I think Glenn thought, so just to kind of break it down, I think Glenn thought that we were proposing 4 potential alternatives for the duplexes. It's really alternative A and B as 2 types, and then as an alternative, it's C and D as a different alternative. But it's not one from any 4. It's one from 2 or one from another 2.
If I might, Mr. Chairman, just so I understand and can explain it to Glenn. So it would be either a grouping of A and B or a grouping of C and D. Okay.
That's right. Right, Ted?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So you can't have A with a D because as he indicated, that's incongruent. So that's the idea.
Okay. So maybe we can get Glenn to do us write up just a memo for us, Bill, just referencing that.
Yeah, I'll have him revise it and clarify that.
Great. And Chris, with regard to the garages, I know we've had this conversation before on
Yeah.
some of the other projects, as far as moving some of the garages over to the sides and the driveways.
Yeah, I saw that comment. I think it's a great comment, and there's definitely opportunity to do that now that we're working with the larger lots. So I think the idea would be to include a condition that says to the maximum extent practicable. Maybe we can take a closer look to see the number of lots that we might be able to do a side driveway. But I think to allow some flexibility, we'd say to the maximum extent practicable, the applicant will explore side garage entrances or side driveways so that not all garage doors are facing the street, in the final plan. And that's the type of design improvement that it benefits everybody to do that sort of thing. So, we certainly have an interest in making sure that, we have some good variation of the look from the street. So you don't get those, when you're dealing with the duplexes, they call it the pig snout layout. We definitely like the idea of coming around the side to the extent we can.
Okay, good. All right. Dan, do you have any comments on that section of the architecture? Okay. Next is, I guess, we did have some comments on it. Dan, I think you talked to the fire chief and with regard to some of his concerns, but those have been resolved, correct, with regard to the fireboxes on the property?
Yeah, I clarified his comments about that. The issue with the alarm systems is that they only apply for larger buildings, not two families. The two family units here don't even need to be automatically sprinklered. So he doesn't need the knockbox for this project. He needs the knockbox for the 194 Main Street project. My understanding is that he really didn't have any concerns with 144 Secon. He's going to want to review the hydrant location plan and make sure they're comfortable with that. I think we've already looked at the turning templates for the site, but Chris, maybe you can confirm that.
Yes, we did look at the turning templates. We did alter one turning movement in the roadway, but I think that's something we can address with a condition as far as that one kink, Dan, where we tried to swing clear of the wetland there. That's the only area, and I don't see any problem at that location.
Okay. And I see the chief is actually still on the meeting, so if he wants to chime in, he could.
Yeah, I myself and Deputy Chief Petrucci looked at everything, and we really didn't see where there was going to be any issues, in terms of access or egress. The way it's laid out, it's a complete circle, so we don't have any dead ends or anything to worry about. So, the only thing we're looking to do is just, once they get further into the planning phase is, hydrant locations and things like that.
Super.
One of the issues that Chief Bushnell had raised early on, I think back in 2018, was water supply and making sure there's adequate water pressure. And I believe the chair talked to the water department today, confirmed that we have adequate water pressure. Chris, is that right? Chris Weeder?
Yeah, we did do hydrant flow tests, right, Ted?
Yes, in 2018, in July or August, we did it, and we had ample pressure.
And the water department confirmed that today. Okay. And I think the police chief had a few comments, but his, I think, were focused around, again, the turning radiuses for the fire department and obviously the entrance going into the development. But I think those are going to be, we're going to clear those up in a condition, Dan, correctly, with regard to clearing on the ROW.
Yeah, I've drafted conditions that deal with site distances. If you want to dive into those, we can talk about them. But yeah, they're not a concern for the fire department or police.
And the police department as well. Okay. Okay. Do any of the board members have any concerns or questions with regard to the architecture? Again, Glenn is probably going to do a follow-up memo, but any concerns with regard to the architecture or the fire chief's comments? Joe?
Not me, Chris. I'm okay.
Mike?
All set.
Kevin?
All set.
Don?
I'm good.
Josie?
I'm fine.
Tim?
All set, thank you.
And Devin?
All set again.
Okay.
Still.
Yeah, did I ask you twice, Devin?
It's feeling special.
Want to make sure you're awake. All right. Dan, do you want to start to go through the our template of the conditions? I think we've basically the architecture's been put to bed, and I think we can start looking at the conditions here.
Okay.
So Dan, I'll let you start.
Yeah, sure. And I'm assuming you just want to hit the highlights. There's really no need to go through all the boilerplate unless you want to.
Nope.
And I think I should just mention at the outset that just so all the other board members are aware, in addition to a comprehensive permit decision in this case, we're also going to have a separate document. It's going to be something called a Memorandum of Agreement that's going to be signed by the applicant and the Board of Selectmen, which will impose some additional conditions, basically ensuring that the developer doesn't appeal this decision, which is viewed as a compromise between what could have been a different decision that the board issues and obviously an 84-unit project, which is what the applicant had requested. So in addition to the 40B permit, there's going to be a separate document called a Memorandum of Agreement, and attached to that will be a recordable land use covenant that would be recorded after the permit's been issued, which also ensures that these conditions that we've come to a compromise on are enforceable in perpetuity, and that they can't change later down the road by perhaps some subsequent owner or a bank or somebody. So just to lay set the stage, that's what we're working on. We're working on two separate documents, but all the zoning board has to be concerned with is the 40B permit. The Memorandum of Agreement is something that we're going to work on with the selectmen, or now the select board. So just starting with the conditions, and I hope everyone got this. I emailed this around 2 o'clock today. Actually, Amy, do you want to put this up on the screen? Or Rich?
While she's doing that, does anybody have any questions with the MOD? Does everybody understand what Dan just went through?
Yeah, I'm okay, Chris. This is Joe.
Okay. I gather no one has any questions on it. Just no reply.
Actually, would it make sense for me to take control of the screen? I'm actually not really sure how to do that.
I think as long as the host lets you do it, you should be able to.
Yeah, Rich, are you still there?
Yeah, sure. If you want to do that, that's fine. So let's see.
Do I just hit the share screen button?
Yeah, Amy, did you film?
Let's try that. Right. Can you share now? Who wanted it, Dan? Dan, can you share now? Yep.
You see it? Okay, everyone can see the decision?
Yep. Yes.
Okay. All right, so section A, this is the approved plan. This is mostly boilerplate, just setting the stage that this is a 44-unit project now in 16 single-family homes and 14 duplex buildings on the site. And condition A2 is a important condition that says that the project site will never be used for vehicular access to any other property. This will prevent any future owner from basically doing an extension of this project onto abutting land. And we do know there's land abutting this property that's open and vacant. So this ensures that what is a 44-unit project will not someday become a 144-unit project. So that kind of condition is also going to be incorporated into the land use covenant that's going to be recorded in the registry of deeds, so that not only is this a condition of the permit, it's going to be an enforceable restriction separate from the permit itself. So A3, before site clearing activities, there needs to be a submission of final plans. This is typically how we do things. As I mentioned in the last meeting, what we generally do is sign off on a set of plans that has been presented to us, and then we have a requirement post permit that revised plans be submitted for our final review and approval, and that's generally done by the consulting engineer, which in this case would be Tetra Tech. So that this just says that the final plans shall be submitted to the zoning board after the permit's been issued. Condition A4 simply says that if there's any changes to the plans or the project, that those will be treated as amendments to the permit, and they would have to be submitted to the zoning board. There's a process later in section I that deals with changes and modifications. At any point, if anyone wants to stop me and ask a question or talk about a condition, just jump in. Condition B1, this requires the applicant to deposit some peer review funds for all the outside experts we're going to have to retain after the project's been approved to review the plans. Typically, this is civil engineering review that happens after the permit's been issued.
Dan?
Yes.
Just pointing out the amount requested here at 15,000, and then a replenish when it gets all the way down to 2,500. I'd like to propose reducing that to 5,000.
Yeah, the reason I put in a higher number than I think what we did for Rockwood was because there's going to be more review post permit for this project than we typically do, and that's because of the settlement that we have and Ted's agreement that there would be a lot more post permit review than there would be pre permit review. So that's why that number is higher than we have used in the past.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. Can we split the difference? And obviously with the board's approval, I think 10,000 should be sufficient, and that should be reflective of, what you've seen as far as peer review expenses month to month. And again, I always say the board has the ultimate trump card that, if these things aren't getting paid, they just shut everything down. So, I just think 15,000 is a bit high, in any circumstance. So maybe go to 10.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, do you want to go through these kind of questions now, or do you want to just save them until later?
Well, you're the one who told him you could ask questions along the way.
There wasn't an invitation.
I don't know why you did that. Just because he wore a sport coat tonight, you should have gone that route. No.
He was missing the banter with Al earlier. That's what it is.
I don't. We'll hold off on answering this question till the end. But Chris, yeah, it's a point. We'll discuss it when we're at the end of this night's meeting. Okay.
Sure. And to Chris's defense, he hasn't had time to review this document, and I would expect him to mark this up with requested changes. So that'll be something that we would talk about at the next meeting. We're going to have to go through, what Chris Agostino is going to ask for in terms of modifications.
Yeah.
All right. So
some of these we can take care of at the end of tonight's meeting too. But keep on going, yeah. And if somebody has a question, yes, we will stop. Okay.
Okay. Moving right along. B2, B3. I think these are standard conditions. B4. This is what we used in past projects, fieldstone to be used on any walls that are visible from Secon Street. I don't know if folks have any issues with that. Seems like a reasonable requirement. There may not even be any walls visible from Secon. B5, B6, I think these are all basically boilerplate. B7, hydrants shall be shown on the plan and approved by the fire chief. Now B8, this is really the meat and potatoes, all right? So what this is basically saying, and this is a unique condition because of the circumstances that we're dealing with, that all we have today is basically a conceptual plan. It's not engineered. It's been reviewed. We've had Tetra Tech review it, but it hasn't been engineered, and we haven't had really any in-depth peer review of it. So what this condition is proposing, and what the applicant has agreed to, is that after the permit has been issued, the applicant will submit a final set of engineered plans, and that will be referred and forwarded to Tetra Tech to review. And one of the things that Tetra Tech's going to look at is how the project complies with the stormwater management standards that are issued by the state. That's DEP. And the stormwater standards deal with everything from, you can't have a higher rate of runoff off of your property post conditions than you have under preconditions. You have to recharge a certain percentage of your stormwater. You have to clean the stormwater before it goes into the ground. So these type of things are handled by the stormwater standards, as well as the stormwater management handbook. There's 3 volumes of that. They're really thick, and it really covers the gamut of drainage utilities. So the applicant has said already at the last meeting that he was willing to comply with all those standards. So that's something that Sean will look at in depth when the final plans are prepared and submitted. So that's A. B,
So Dan, just
Yep.
if you don't mind, and I do agree that this is where the rubber meets the road, and certainly the applicant, agrees in principle that there will be this review process, and it's going to be a little more detail oriented than you might otherwise see. But just the one thing on stormwater management I wanted to point out is that the site does have wetlands on it. So I think we're probably going to be at the point where, when we come back to the ZBA, we're going to have an order of conditions in hand that will demonstrate compliance with the stormwater management or the stormwater management regulations. So I just think, sort of as a general comment, we don't have to wordsmith it right here, but I think that proof of obtaining an order of conditions shall be deemed satisfaction of that standard, number one. And then I've separated out, just in reviewing this, the wastewater issues. And I think it's worth just a brief discussion conceptually while everybody's listening. Stormwater, as I said, can be reviewed by Concom and in connection with the order of conditions. On wastewater, I think we should make the distinction between the proposed combined system for the condo and the individual septic systems proposed for each house. And I just want to get a sense, Dan, of what you think or how you see that being done, because generally we wouldn't show up to the ZBA with a septic plan for all 16 houses and the full septic plan for the condo. So how do you see that playing out conceptually?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And my intent with Section A was actually just looking at the condo's shared septic system, not the individual septic systems in each lot, because I agree, you're going to be applying for separate Title V permits for each house. And that's something that the Board of Health can manage just on its own without, there's no need for Sean to review those septic plans, in my opinion. Is that what you are asking?
Yeah. So then, I think you and I can wordsmith this. I think just from the board's perspective, do they understand the concept, and they're okay with us kind of hammering out how this should work? And my other question: do you agree that the order of conditions would prove compliance?
Not really. So I think the intent here was that, first of all, you're asking for a waiver from the town's stormwater bylaw. And so I think the board is prepared to grant that condition upon its satisfaction that this project complies with the state standards. So I think it actually makes more sense for for you to submit your, or for Tetra Tech to be the engineer that reviews your notice of intent for the Conservation Commission, and that this be coordinated. Obviously, there shouldn't be duplication. There shouldn't be an engineer reviewing this for Concom and a separate person reviewing it for the zoning board. But I think it should be done in coordination and concert, and I think that should be Tetra Tech, since they're the ones who've already reviewed this.
Yeah, I certainly agree with the coordination. I think, yeah, let's table that. I think we're on the same page. I think it's just, you know, if there's ever any dispute, understanding that, yeah, they've waived the local bylaw. If the standard is compliance with the SMR, then any dispute ultimately would be adjudicated by the DEP because they do have jurisdiction over the site. But let's table that, and we'll come back to it.
Okay, I'm not worried about conflicts here as long as we have one engineer reviewing this for the entire town, and I think that's just going to be the thing that we make sure that happens is that there's coordination.
So on the wastewater for the condos, that would be the Board of Health as well, because they're going to.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, I think I agree with Dan that, you know, that is a plan that's same thing with stormwater management. I think the board's engineer, Tetra Tech, is going to be assisting the Board of Health. And I think we'd like to see that. We'd like to see some coordination there rather than just, you know, dump it on the Board of Health type thing.
Sure. Just to clarify, no, and I think Ted already knows this, that the Board of Health still has to do their work. So we want, and they're the ones that have to issue the permit. So their agent's going to do the review in order for the Board of Health to then issue the permit.
A question for you. We used Tetra Tech's consultant when we were up doing the testing, deep hole testing back in September and October. Would it be possible, if Wade was busy, to have Tetra Tech monitor the perk tests on site for the 16 lots?
That's up to the Board of Health. That we can't, because it's state law. We can't tell the Board of Health what to do on that. All right, so I think we covered A. Subsection B was so. Just to be clear, A, B, and C are all findings that need to be made before the final plans are approved. So A was the stormwater. B is that the construction of the project's roadways, buildings, and structures are feasible and can be carried out in accordance with standard practices. Again, this is something that our peer review engineers like Beta or Tetra Tech would do during the public hearing. So that's a kind of more of a high level review. And so that's B. And then C. C is kind of a catch-all. And again, this is something that our peer review engineer would have done had the hearing still been open, but the applicant has agreed to defer this post permit and has put a lot of faith, justifiably so, in Tetra Tech to exercise good judgment in working with their engineer to suggest any improvements. So what C is saying is that Tetra Tech is satisfied that the proposed layout and configuration of lots of buildings and roads on the site plans are the best configuration that can be used on the site. So that in considering what the best configuration is, we look at site distances, we look at vehicular access, internal access, we consider the need to protect public health and safety in the environment and to preserve the open spaces. All of that language comes straight out of Chapter 40B. So in layman's terms, what this means is that the plan that's given to Tetra Tech to review, one of the things that Sean is going to be looking at is to say, look, there might be a better way to angle this road, or there might be a better way to configure this lot or this septic system. So the point of this is that the applicant has to listen to Sean and make changes that are reasonable, that Sean thinks would be an improvement for the site design.
Yeah, Dan, your explanation is very helpful because in my initial pass through this, I deleted C and just said, what is that doing there? But now that you've explained it, I think with a little bit of clarification to accomplish what you've described relative to the final plan, I think that makes sense. So,
Yeah.
but I was wondering what that was all about, and it didn't necessarily accomplish what I think you just described, but I think understanding the concept will get that done.
Yeah, and frankly, this is what typically happens with peer review during a public hearing. And we would have this back and forth between Sean and Kristen.
Yeah, yep. As to the detailed tweaking of how the units are laid out and the grading. Yeah, you're right. I got you.
Okay. Yeah, for home orientation and everything on the lots, this is perfect. So,
okay. So I'll stop right here since this was a pretty big condition. Do any board members want to ask any questions or make comments?
One thing I want to chime in on is on I know we haven't received engineered plans, but the applicant was showing stormwater ponds in excess of 6 feet, which I think would fall under regulation of the Office of Dam Safety. I just want to make sure that we have some note in there that they shall comply with the Office of Dam Safety if applicable.
Yep.
To be quite upfront, I've been kind of involved in some projects that were questionable in the embankment designs, and they're proving to be interesting right now. So,
yeah, that shouldn't be a problem, Devin, that condition. That's perfect.
Devin, can you email that to me just so I have the right terminology?
Sure.
Yeah, and having run up against that before, I know that if it looks like that, we're probably going to have to redesign to avoid any dam safety issues with stormwater management. But thanks for pointing that out, Devin. Yeah, we'll make sure that's in there.
Yep, thank you.
All right. Anything else on B8?
Yeah, Dan, I think, agree in concept. We'll just do some wordsmithing just to make sure that, the idea is to ensure that the final plans are thoroughly vetted and compliance and consistency with the final plan that's attached to this decision is confirmed. I think we just want to avoid a situation where, there's any room for meddling in the determination of compliance, and you and I can accomplish that.
Yep. All right, so B9 says that the applicant must submit enough detail so that the consulting engineer can make these informed decisions, and that we would be looking for, at a minimum, the same plan sheets that the applicant had provided on July 25th, 2019. Looking back at that plan set, that was actually a very comprehensive plan set. So I think actually, is Sean Reardon on this call tonight? I didn't see his name on.
No, I don't see his name.
Okay. So, I mean, I'm expecting Sean is going to probably give me some feedback on a lot of this language, and he may want to tweak some of these conditions as well. But anyway.
Yeah, I saw how you made it comparable to what was previously submitted, and I think that's fine. Okay,
so I'll talk to Sean before the next meeting about what he's expecting for level of detail. B10, this is really boilerplate taken from the last permit we did for Rockwood. Same with B11. B12 is boilerplate. B13, same. B14, same. B15, these are the prerequisites that the applicant must comply with before starting any activity in the site, including site clearing.
One question, Attorney Hill, if I may. We do need permission to get up to do some perk tests for the 16 individual lots. So that should get factored in there, I believe.
Yeah, I don't think this would prohibit that.
Okay.
But
we'll
we can add language.
Okay.
Yeah, Chris, you can propose language on that. So all of these prerequisites are boilerplate. They come from previous projects. I don't think there's anything in here that's unique to this project. Section H right here is a construction management plan condition that we've used in some projects. I don't think we did this for Rockwood because it was a smaller site and a smaller project. We have for bigger projects. And then B16 is that before any building permits are issued, the building inspector needs to review the architectural plans, which is something you would do anyway.
So Dan, just quickly on B15, I believe we did a pretty comprehensive one for Boyd's Crossing. And, you know, some of these things Ted could probably check off pretty quickly. So I think in our comments back, we might propose some finality here on these conditions just to check them off and get them done rather than to the extent we can. So I think I might propose that.
Sure. And by the way, I think we've had some confusion over this condition in past projects. This isn't a list of everything you need to provide. This is just a list of things that if you're doing something regarding any of these issues, you have to tell us what you're doing. So if you're not doing any blasting at all, then you don't need to give us any of this stuff. If you're not going to have construction trailers and refueling areas, you don't need to provide that information. But if you are doing those things, that's information that the town would like to have. So just moving ahead to section C. C1, this project is a for sale project. It has to be for sale absent a modification to the comprehensive permit. C2 is saying that all the infrastructure on the project site, including the roadways and drainage structures, are going to be maintained by the applicant and the applicant's successors, which means all the future homeowners, unless and until the roadway is transferred over to the town of Norfolk as a public way. And I believe that's now the intent, is that the roadway would be petitioned as a public way after it's been completed. So at that point, the town would take it over as well as the drainage. I have a section here about the Condo Trust. The Condo Trust is going to be responsible for the condo opening common areas. We're going to need a plan that shows, that delineation of where the condo areas are. Obviously, its own wastewater system. If there's any unique stormwater systems, that'll be all managed by the condo association. And these are just boilerplate conditions. C3 speaks to waivers. That's boilerplate. C4, boilerplate. C5, same. C6, same. 7, 8, 9.
One question on C8, if we could, Dan.
Yep.
I was wondering if it was possible to get some kind of a break on the cost of the permit fees for the affordable unit. I think that's been happened on other projects in the town.
Which permit fees? The water connections, or which ones?
So whatever fees, I believe in some of the other projects, the applicants were given discounts on proportionate to the actual value of the homes being sold, because the affordable units are sold basically at a loss. So.
I'll have to defer to the board. I don't know if we've done that in the past. I don't remember that being an issue.
Okay.
All right, so we'll take that under advisement. Section D, the affordability requirements. This is all boilerplate. I don't think we need to get into this unless somebody wants to. There's nothing in this section that's unique to this project that we haven't used in other projects. So section E is project construction. E1 and E2 are boilerplate conditions. Same thing with 3 and 4. 4, this is something that we came up with for Rockwood. I believe this comes straight out of a bylaw section that the town has adopted. Chris Agostino, I think you actually came up with this last time. I think you found this in the bylaw, is that right?
Yeah, it looks very well written and well thought through, so I'm sure, you know.
Okay. E5, boilerplate 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Sorry, and you know, I thank you for getting this over this afternoon. I'm actually, this is helpful that we're going through it. Just give me a second as I kind of flip through it. Sorry, what section were you on now?
Well, I'm on E10.
Okay. All right. Yep, we're good.
So E11 is blasting. 12, this is boilerplate. So 13, this is what we've, I think, done in the past for the most part, is that for 40B projects, we would waive the subdivision regulations with respect to the curbing. So we would allow vertical bituminous concrete at the edge of the paved surface between the road and the sidewalk. Granite curb, however, would have to be used for intersection radii, and I see I have a carryover here from the last decision.
And do we usually do vertical bituminous or like Cape Cod?
So we've been doing a monolithic berm, Cape Cod berm, not the vertical. So it's cool with the top coat.
Experience with vertical bituminous is it just gets destroyed after the first plow hits it. So
yeah.
Okay, so we can.
And the granite curbing goes also where there are drainage areas. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think Dan has that in there. And I think that's, Dan, correct me if I'm mistaken, because I don't have it up in front of me, but you note that it's as shown on the plans, the approved plans. I mean, did our June submittal or July submittal, whatever it was, show these profiles as you have it noted?
No.
It was all Cape Cod berm. All Cape Cod berm we've been
show
showing.
any granite, Ted?
Maybe at the catch basins only.
No,
I think the DPW are going to give us directions on this because the road will be accepted into the town.
Yeah, I think this works, Dan.
Yeah.
Okay, so you can get back to us on that.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so again, this is carryover from Rockwood, so this actually comes out because you haven't shown us that detail yet.
We'll match DPW's requested standards.
Oh wait, this is repetitive. This is the same condition. All right. So moving on to section F. So one of the great changes to this project is that the area that's inside the loop road is going to remain, for the most part, its natural condition, except for the houses that are at the very end and the drainage basin. This condition just repeats that area within the loop road must remain in its natural state. It can't be used for any other purpose or use, and also that that land that's to remain in its natural state be encumbered by a conservation restriction that the applicant would convey to the Conservation Commission before any occupancy permits are issued in the project.
So Dan, if we could just touch on that, and agreed, the preservation of the interior loop is I think stepping back and looking at the overall design, hopefully a home run for the project. So where our intent is definitely to maintain that. I think I had some comments back to you in the MOU about how we go about doing that. And you reference here, again, a conservation restriction. I think our goal would be to, well, number one, I think we solve the restriction by putting it in the permit, but we're giving the town belt and suspenders by giving you guys that declaration of restrictive covenants, which is fine. I just want to clarify, are you talking about an additional conservation restriction in addition to the permit and the declaration of restrictive covenants? Or I think we can accomplish this in the declaration of restrictive covenants, correct?
No, I was envisioning a separate document because conservation restrictions are sort of a unique animal. They are reviewed by DEP.
Yeah, they're like impossible. Like the amount of time that goes into chasing down the Secretary of Environmental Affairs to get a conservation restriction actually approved, like no one does them. So I think that was my comment back, is that, you know, we have the permit that is a perpetual restriction. And then, you know, that's also going to be enforceable by abutters. And we're also giving the declaration of restrictive covenants that the selectmen can enforce as a private restriction. I just think, you know, it's going to save, I think it's going to cost everybody, the town and the developer, a lot of time chasing one more document. And, you know, I'd hope that we can give the town a very high level of assurance that once this is recorded, both with the permit and the declaration of covenants, that nothing's going to happen in there.
All right, so let me ask you this question though. What was your intent with respect to this property after the project's been built? I mean, who's going to own the fee in this area?
That's a good question. So what I actually have done in the past, and we could write it into the declaration of restrictive covenants, is that whoever owns it, and my sense is it would be, that's a good question, Dan.
So maybe my point is maybe Ted just conveys it to the Conservation Commission and fee.
Yep,
that's easier, or
easy.
or we give an easement. You know, I've done negative easements before, and we just say that, you know, an easement in favor of the town, and the easement prevents anything from being done on them. But yeah, I think that's for the lawyers to solve. So I think just if conceptually, you know, we can all agree to just save one extra document, you and I will come up with the most efficient way to accomplish the goal there.
Okay. Why don't we table that, and you and I can talk about that between now.
And then just quickly, one more thing that gets sensitive in those sort of preservation documents is I've had instances where, you know, you get a couple trees that get knocked over in a bad storm, and they can be dangerous where they're sort of precariously perched up against another tree, and you have people walking through the woods, or, you know, it's unsightly. So usually I leave an exception for good forestry practices and you know, management to ensure that the homeowners association, if they deem it appropriate, can go in there and they don't get in a fight, you know, as long as it's consistent with good forestry practices.
Okay.
And you and I can table that, I think, just raising it as a concern.
All right, we can wordsmith this later.
Don raised his hand.
Yeah, I just have a quick question. After this site, can you hear me?
Yep.
After this site is totally built out and it's turned over to the homeowners association or whatever it's going to be called, so does this, what you're talking about, cover, let's say the homeowners association decides they want to put a tennis court in the middle of that property, and they vote to put a tennis court in, and everybody says yes, and it's unanimous. Does this prevent them from going through with that, since I assume they're paying taxes on this piece of land?
Yes, it will prevent them from doing that based on everything we've discussed, and Dan and I will accomplish that. That the whole point is that we're taking extra precautions to ensure that that is going to be preserved in perpetuity. And we're all on the same page. It's just the darn lawyers have to figure out how to do it for the least number of words and the least amount of cost and without messing everything else up.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Section G is public safety and fire protection. So the first couple conditions deal with site distances, which has been a big focus of the hearing. So condition G1 recognizes that the location of the driveway was shifted north by 32.5 feet, and that the project will be designed accordingly. G2.
Dan, real quick on that first one. Can we get an updated memo from Phil Sherry showing, I think it's important for that document to show exactly where that driveway is. I know that the newest one that was issued and is referenced shows just approximately where that driveway is. In other words, that driveway is not engineered on that memorandum.
Right.
And I did go out there with Mr. O'Hart last week or the week before, just to walk that area. And yeah, I was taking a look at the just memo again. And one thing I did notice was that the stopping sight distance they provide actually shows one of the vehicles driving through the other vehicle. So I just think that needs to be addressed on the final one.
So yeah, Chris Agostino, is it a problem to have Phil Cherry provide an updated site distance plan that actually plots the driveway where it's going to be?
Yeah, it is. So I just, that would require, going back to ASE and having ASE coordinate with WSP, and it's, I think the February 11th memo, and I'm looking at it right now, identifies exactly where it needs to be. And I think that the idea would be to leave it, and you can wordsmith it in the condition that the engineer can figure out in the final plan exactly where that driveway layout needs to be shown based on the February 11th memo. And Devin, I'm looking at it right now, and I just, I don't know where it's showing new driveway location, and it gives a precise measurement, and it shows exactly where it's intending to put it. Why do we need to draw that out?
I just felt that it was important, given that there's inadequate sight distance, that it should be plotted precisely showing that. And just also to my other point, that on the final page of the memorandum, where the car is turning left into the driveway, it actually shows the opposite vehicles crashing into each other.
Yeah, I don't believe that's what that's, and I'm looking at it right now, and I see there's another car there, but.
The last page.
Yeah, I see it. So that's the J scenario. I think, or sorry, the case F scenario. And, we've been through this 1,000 different ways. I think, with that driveway where it is, the point is that we do have sufficient sight distance. So I'm surprised I'm still hearing that. The only one that we have any concern about is this case F, and case F is not one of the critical instances. So I think, I'd like to take the overall board's temperature on this, but the idea in reducing the number of units to 44 at this point was so that we weren't spending money on more plans pre-permit. And we really would want to, where we have, the new driveway location identified, the whole idea is that's got to be shown in the final set of plans. And I think Dan and I, in a few words, can adequately condition that so that when you get the final plan, it's correctly oriented.
Would that suffice, Devin, if it was in the final plans as a condition?
Just so I can just give my opinion on this, you know,
Okay.
Stopping sight distance was created, or you know, was regulated by the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials. This memorandum shows that there's inadequate sight distance.
That's
I understand that.
It's correct, Devin.
How is that incorrect?
There's Dan, can you recap this just so that, you know, we're all on the same page? The only, with the observed speeds at 40 miles an hour, okay, the actual observed, not the Chris Agostino, we're going to put in measures to mitigate the speed. The actual highest observed speed, the worst case scenario, is 40 miles per hour design speed. With that design speed, there's adequate intersection sight distance and stopping sight distance at this new driveway location, okay? The only scenario where there's any potential concern is the case F that's shown on the last page, and the case F is not one of the critical issues. It's not one of the critical concerns as articulated in the February 11th memo. So the board is more than covered with the February 11th memo. And I just, if you're still seeing that there's inadequate stopping sight distance or intersection sight distance at the new location, then I think the memo explains why that's not the case at the new location.
Chris, the only thing I disagree with is the fact that this memo does show that, as you said, it's, you know, if you say it's 40 miles per hour design speed, there's 35.6, and there's a conflict there. There's a conflict between a vehicle turning left off Secon Street into the driveway. I understand. I don't disagree that mitigation efforts were taken, but it doesn't matter if there's 200 units or if there's 10 units. There's still this issue with stopping sight distance of a vehicle turning left over traffic going the opposite direction. That's, you know, that's my belief, and that's what this shows. So the purpose of me asking for an updated memo was just to show more precisely where that driveway was. I do understand your point on that new driveway location, but just my other point, you can see that gray car crosses over the black car, which indicates that that's a T-bone action. So there's actually even less stopping sight distance than is provided.
All right. Yeah, you know, we could talk in circles on this. I think when you say stopping sight distance, you have to say in the case F scenario. And then this memo explains why the case F scenario is not of concern. So the case F scenario has been addressed in this memo. That's the answer to your question, just the case F. So I wouldn't refer to it as a stopping sight distance issue. It's the case F issue. And
the
this
case F has deficient stopping sight distance. And it is a concern because it's a concern of mine. And, you know, I've been kind of harping on the stopping sight distance, you know, for quite a few months now. So I understand that, you know, the applicant's team has proposed mitigation efforts, but in this case of AASHTO and, you know, their documents, I think the facts are present, and I've given my concerns.
Okay, so I think where we're at is that the applicant has done the best that they can to mitigate sight distance deficiencies. I agree with Devin that there is still a sight distance deficiency because this area is not controlled by the applicant, it's private property. And so that there is deficient left turn sight distance. I don't agree with Chris that this is less important. It's as important as all of the other ones. And also correct the record that there still is deficient intersection site distance. It's not, you don't have it at 14.5 feet, you have it at 10 feet. And you also don't have it in this curved section here where my mouse is. So when a vehicle is in this location on Secon Street, you have site distance, but when the vehicle actually comes into this curve, you lose it. So you actually still have deficient intersection site distance in this location. So I think what's happened here is that you've moved this driveway further north. It makes it better than it was. And your reduction of density significantly decreases the risk of public safety harm. So I think that's where we are. There was a significant public safety issue. There is still a public safety issue, but it's been significantly reduced by the change plan, and that's how I'm viewing the current status of this project. So I guess going back to section G2, condition G2, this requires the applicant to clear the vegetation that is in those sight lines, and we just look at those on this plan. So to be clear what we're talking about, it's vegetation clearing would occur in front of this property here for the left turn sight distance. Anything that's in the right of way that could potentially be a problem it has to be cleared. So whether it's intersection site distance or left turn site distance, the applicant will be responsible for clearing the vegetation. G2 requires the applicant to coordinate this with the DPW and police department. So if they're taking down trees or bushes or branches, they have to do that work in conjunction with the DPW and under their supervision. And then I also added some language here that prior to performing any work within a right-of-way that's abutting the properties of 141 and 150 Secon Street, that the applicant would have to stake out the property boundary where the right-of-way meets those properties, and tag the trees, any trees that they're proposing to take down. This will just give these abutters the opportunity to make sure that what's being cleared and taken is truly on the street side of the boundary and not on their property. So that should give them a sense of security there. And also that the staking of the property boundary, the right-of-way boundary, be done in conformity with the Dunham-Mackenzie survey plan that the town commissioned back in January of 2020. So that's condition G2 concerning vegetation clearing. And then G3 requires the applicant to basically effectuate the proposed mitigation conditions that were in Phil Cherry's February 11th memo to the board. And these are really just for discussion purposes. I actually had a conversation this afternoon with our traffic peer review consultant, Kim Hazaverdian, and he thought all of these conditions made sense. He agreed with them. So number one, there would be a speed feedback sign that's installed on Secon Street that would warn motorists if they're going over the speed limit. There would be another sign that would to notify northbound Secon Street drivers of the project intersection. That sign is actually on this memo. Yeah, this is the mitigation that Phil Cherry proposed. So this is the speed feedback sign. Then you've got this warning sign that he proposed, which Kim agrees with.
Now, is that sign going to have a 35-mile-per-hour plaque as the posted speed limit is on Secon Street in that area?
Some of the signs, Devin, have a.
Ted, you're breaking up a little bit.
Sorry, some of the signs, Devin, have a 25-mile-an-hour limit in that area. One just south of the site has a 25-mile-an-hour warning. It's not an actual speed limit; it's a warning light.
Yeah, there's the 25-mile-per-hour for the I think it's the intersection with what street is that? Cleveland.
Yeah.
It's the advisory for the Cleveland Street.
Yeah.
I think we lost Dan.
Yeah, Dan appears to be missing.
Give them a little bit of time to get back online.
It could be a PC out of power. Sometimes we forget to put our plugs back in.
I will admit it happened to me last week during the ZBA meeting.
Yeah,
Hey, you know how those lawyers are, okay? They just keep talking and talking, and they don't realize that no one's listening, right?
Or they're just using too much battery power.
Yeah, he could still be talking. Does anybody text him?
Charging the time.
It's only money, Ted.
So, yeah. As a taxpayer, it hurts, right? Yeah. Chris, do you want to just finish for him?
Chris, can you let Dan back in? He's trying to get back in. Can you let him back in? There you are, Dan. Okay, you're coming.
Sorry about that, guys.
So
I got bounced out.
So Dan, my question was, are we going to require a plaque posting the speed limit underneath the speed feedback sign? I believe the posted speed limit on Secon Street in that direction is 35, and then you have the 25-mile-per-hour intersection. What do you want to call it? Sign posted for the Cleveland and Secon Street intersection. Kind of just before the entrance to the driveway if we're headed in the northbound direction.
Yeah, I mean, that's a detail for the sign that we can, if you want to add that as a condition, we can, or we can just leave that to the discretion of DPW if they want to add that or not. It's up to you.
Yeah, I imagine Dan will coordinate all these details with the DPW. So.
Yeah, I think typically those signs do have the speed limit so that people know that they're speeding.
Yeah.
No, I part of my point is if it's a 35-mile-per-hour zone and you get a speed feedback that you're going, 40 miles an hour, nobody's slowing down in Massachusetts.
So you want the sign to say 25?
I guess, can we do that? I'm not sure. I believe a 25 is going to do it either in Massachusetts based off my driving, my observed driving of others throughout the state.
I think we probably should leave it to DPW. I don't think we can specify that, Dan. I think we have to let the DPW identify that.
Yeah.
We can ask them to make sure they put this posted speed limit on the sign. I guess maybe you can wordsmith that, right?
Yeah.
To Devin's point, when we're driving into town, let's say coming from Route 1, when you come from Foxborough into Norfolk along, I guess it's Pine Street, we have one of those feedback signs. that actually tells you how fast you're going, but doesn't tell you what the speed limit is until you get further down the road. So that's a good point that Devin brings up. I agree with him.
It more or less just confirms my concern that if it's a 35-mile-an-hour road and you have a 35-mile-per-hour underneath the speed feedback.
Yep, I agree, because if I see that feedback coming at me, I want to know, okay, what's my speed limit then? Agreed.
Okay, so should we go back to the conditions?
Yes.
All right. Can everyone see this now?
Yep.
Okay. The third mitigation proposal was a street light at the intersection of the project roadway and Secon Street, so that vehicles can adequately see any cars that are going to be on the driveway at night. So I talked to Kim, and he actually pointed out that there's already a telephone pole on Secon Street right at the intersection, and I actually took a snapshot of it. So it's this pole here. It's utility pole 73, according to Phil's plan. The project entrance is really right across the street from it. So I think we can add a condition. I think the applicant can ensure that we can put a lamp at the top of this pole, and that would satisfy by that condition. All right. Moving on to G4, the numbering system and identification dwelling units shall be subject to approval of the fire chief. Chris Weeder pointed out to me today that street names in Norfolk are actually under the jurisdiction of the select board, so we'll change this to the select board. All right. G5, this is a comment that was made by the prior fire chief, just requiring that there be a site plan that provides a swept path analysis demonstrating that there's adequate turning radii for all the fire trucks and the ladder truck. So I believe that's been done. Chris mentioned that earlier tonight, and so that's just going to be a submittal requirement after the permit's been issued. And also provide documentation of adequate water pressure. Sounds like that's already been done, but again, that's a submittal requirement. And then the fire chief today or yesterday mentioned that there's a checklist that the former fire chief had actually prepared, which lists all the state fire code requirements that would be applicable to a project like this. And I'm not sure if I have that handy, but anyway, that would be a condition as well, that the applicant demonstrate compliance with all those fire code provisions. And it's something they have to do anyway under the state fire code. G8, there'll be no on-street parking within the project site. I'm assuming the board still wants to keep that kind of condition in here. We've imposed that for all other projects. G9, requiring a minimum separation of 10 feet between structures. That's not going to be an issue with this project now that we've reduced the density. G10, driveway lengths have to be at least 19 feet to prevent any encroachments on sidewalks. G11, you need to put your base and binder coat of pavement down before you apply for any building permits, so we have adequate access to all the building sites in the project for emergency vehicles. G12, same purpose. All the water lines and hydrants need to be installed and operational, so that if there's a fire, God forbid, during construction of the project, we have adequate water supply. Section 11 deals with our surety provisions. We've had some lengthy discussions about these in the past. So just in a nutshell, I'll just explain how this works. Basically, instead of requiring a bond, which is what the planning board would do for a subdivision, the way this works is that the developer can't get any certificates of occupancy for any units, and therefore cannot sell any units until they've completed most, if not all, of the roadway infrastructure that's required to serve those units. This has worked well in the past with other projects here in Norfolk as well as other towns. No more than half of the occupancy permits shall issue until all of the infrastructure is completed, with the exception of the final coat of pavement. That typically gets put on after a winter duration. And then the applicant can also substitute a tri-party agreement in lieu of this covenant, so that it can proceed to sell units as long as there's financial surety in place to protect the town if the roads don't get completely built out. That's actually that condition H2. This condition H1C just simply requires that there be an as-built plan for all the roads and infrastructure, stormwater utilities that's filed with the town, the DPW, after the project's been constructed. H2 is that tri-party agreement I just mentioned. And then H3 is a bond requirement or a tri-party requirement for site clearing. And we've used this condition in the past to protect the town, that if a developer were to go onto a property and just clear cut and destabilize a site, and then somehow walks away. Let's say a developer goes in and clear cuts and then goes bankrupt or goes to jail or whatever, and the site's just left there fallow. This provides some security to the town that they can take some money to go back in and stabilize the site, so it doesn't result in a mess to the abutters. Moving on to section I, this is water, wastewater utilities. I need to talk to Sean Reardon about any specific hydrology conditions that he or Peter Dillon felt were necessary for this project. Now that the project is a conventional septic system and not a groundwater discharge permit wastewater treatment plant system, I don't think we have the same concerns about hydrology as we had before. So, but there might be something here that Sean thinks is appropriate. This is basically all boilerplate language under section I. Section J is boilerplate. This just regulates what would happen if the developer would like to amend the comprehensive permit. And this does happen quite often. There'll be changes based upon like market conditions or something else. So there may be a request to change the permit. The way, this basically says that you need to make your request to the zoning board. If it's a substantial change, there'll be a public hearing. The standard of review that the board would apply would be very similar to the standards that you apply for special permits. Special permits that are granted for grandfathered structures.
Hey, Dan, on that one, I'm going to put Rich on the hot seat. Are there specific things that are like such minor in nature, like a small construction change, like, I can't put a fence here because, something's in the way? Could that be handled like administratively and could be built into that condition?
I thought, Dan, didn't you have something in there earlier about this?
I apologize if you do.
I'm not sure if I understand, Devin. I mean, anything that's insubstantial that requires an amendment to the permit would come before the zoning board, but wouldn't require a hearing. So that would just be Ted makes an appointment to come at the next zoning board meeting we put on the agenda.
I know, but it's still, I won't speak for, Chris and his team, but, it can be kind of tedious to, if you want to just make one small alteration, like, instead of a fence going right here, I need to shift it over, 10 feet to avoid a conflict or, just something small like that,
Yeah, Devin, in practice, the money we talked about earlier in that section B1 provides for funding a construction monitor as well. And in practice, it's sort of, it when you see it. And I think the ZBA does rely on the construction monitor to approve field changes that really
That's exactly, yeah.
have no material bearing on the development of the project. But if they ever get curious about something, they certainly, the first call goes to the chair, and since you're an engineer, they probably call you, and then from there it just spreads like wildfire. And if it's worth a hearing, you have a hearing on it. Is generally how.
No, fair enough. What I want to avoid is just something minor. All of a sudden, we're approving just stuff every week for a small change.
Are you trying to get rid of me and Ted? You don't want us coming before the board anymore? Is that?
I'm just trying to save Ted money.
Thank you, Devin.
Oh yeah, the construction monitor has discretion there.
And I think in the past, as Rich will agree, is that typically if there is a minor modification, it just gets handled administratively and doesn't come before the board. So it's pretty easily handled. It's just brought up to the planner, and then he brings it up to the chair, and we pretty much can take care of it. So I think that can be handled, Devin.
My comment is just based off past experience elsewhere.
Okay. Well, I say at least so far we've had a pretty good,
elsewhere, right?
we got a pretty good system so far. So.
All right.
Okay, so I think we've gone through all the conditions. We haven't talked about waivers, but we don't have, I think I'm waiting for the waiver list from the applicant. And that's something that we want to get input on from Sean Reardon, as we have in the past with Abbeville and Enclave. So,
But I think, Dan, I think we also have some conditions with regard to the abutters, right, Ted?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I had met with the Cullens, Mr. and Mrs. Cullen, a couple of weeks ago, and they had some concerns, and we discussed them, and we reached an agreement. And I believe Mrs. Cullen has contacted you, Mr. Chairman, and you should be aware, or hopefully you can find out the details of what Mrs. Cullen and Mr. Cullen would like.
And I've given those, Dan has those, so Dan will incorporate those in the next set of conditions.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we have another, there are a couple others that we have our eye on, Mr. Chairman, that we'll make sure get in there as we all know.
Right, and we still have a couple, I think, the Gershaws, we're going to,
yes,
they're prepared tonight to discuss it, but they had a couple of issues, so I mean, we'll get to the public. I guess let's, Dan, if you're finished with that, do you want to see if the board has any questions? I know, I think we probably should tackle, the one thing we should tackle, I'm comfortable, Devin, with the sight lines and the fact that they're going to, in the final plan, show where the driveway's going. I think we can all agree or agree to disagree that at 40 miles an hour, there's some concerns. At 38.5 miles an hour, they meet the ASTRO standards. I think the mitigation of reducing this to 44 units has taken into account that. And I think, as you said, we're not trying to save Ted money, but we're trying to make sure we get a good project at a good cost. So I think I'm comfortable with the final plan showing the driveway. And I think the mitigation that's going to happen will take care of the that left turn issue in I guess Appendix F. I don't know. Do any other board members have any feelings on that? Mike?
Mr. Chairman, I tend to agree with your assessment. I think that's the way to go.
Go.
Yeah, Chris, I would support what you just said about I support what you're saying about this, yes.
Don?
I'm in agreement, yes.
Tim?
I agree. It sounds like the mitigation has gone a long way with the scope of the project being changed significantly. It sounds like it's a reasonable solution and it's safe.
Okay. Josie, are you still with us? No. Devin, do you understand where we're coming from? Because I know it probably doesn't solve your issue, but I think you can appreciate what we're all trying to accomplish.
I've already given my opinion. I won't beat a dead horse. Okay.
The other issue we brought up tonight, or one of the issues on the conditions, was the reduction from 15 to 5 to 10 for the peer reviews. I don't have an issue with the upper limit starting at 10. I wouldn't change the lower limit so it goes below 2,500, as we said, everything stops if there isn't replenished to 10 again. Is there any other concerns with regard to whether it be 10 or 15 on the upper limit? Mike?
I think 10 is fine.
Don?
10 is fine with me.
Kevin?
That's fine.
Kim?
Yeah, 10 is fine with the floor of 2,500.
Okay. And did I miss anybody?
Joe.
Joe.
Joe says 10 is fine.
Okay. All right. Ted, we will look into, I've got some information saying that fees were not lowered on the building permits, but we will verify that just to dot our
Thank
eyes
you,
on
Mr.
that.
Chairman. Thank you.
Dan, anything, Chris, do you want to talk about some of the conditions you had, or do we want to open it up to the public for, I know the Gershaws, I don't know if they're still with us, if they have some thoughts on mitigation, or do you want to talk about some of the conditions you wanted to put forward? Chris?
You're referring to me?
Yes.
Well, no, I just noted that we are going to make sure that any mitigation that we've offered to neighbors is properly incorporated in the permit. And I haven't had a chance to do that yet, but we'll make sure it's there, and we'll make sure that the neighbors certainly have an opportunity to, stay informed with the process to make sure that everything that needs to be in here gets in here.
Okay. Okay. Dan, anything?
I'm good.
Okay. So,
Chris, can I say something?
as long as it's not about that left-hand turn.
It's not.
Okay.
This is more of what I think should be a kind of a boilerplate condition going forward. I think we should prevent the sale of borough materials from the site. I just don't want any site turning into like a gravel pit or anything like that. So can we have a condition that material can't be, stockpiled, someone in a pickup truck drives into the site, picks up material, and then just leaves.
As long as, as long as we don't inhibit the developer from, in fact, there may be situations where there's excess of one material and the developer needs to sell that material so that he can buy a different material to augment the site.
Yeah, so it's not trying to prevent that. It's trying to prevent just, saying, I apologize for using this as an example, but, having a sign like at the front of, 144 Secon Street saying, gravel, $5 a yard or something, just something like that. Or
Ed, were you planning on selling stuff from the curbside?
No.
The reason why I bring this up.
That's not a problem if that condition gets out of
$5 a yard, $5 a yard, I'm coming.
It's 25.
Chris, the reason why I bring this up is there's one town in Massachusetts right now that the town, I can't remember what town it was. There's news articles on it, but one of the developers was selling gravel or allegedly selling gravel. The town issued cease and desist orders. Police, I think, got involved, and I'm not sure if there was ever an intention to sell even or to construct a 40B project or to just sell gravel. That's kind of what's in contention right now, I think. So just trying to avoid a situation like that.
Dan, do you think you can put some together, some kind of a simple boilerplate that would talk to that?
I can. Why don't I think about it, and I'll talk to Chris about it, and we can come up with that.
You had no plan on selling gravel or dirt or loom to anybody?
Zero, no. Sean Reardon already has a tentative figure, an approximate figure on the earlier plans of the cut and fill we'll be doing. I believe we're taking out about 45,000 yards or something. So, and that will go somewhere, but it won't be sold via pickup loads or having individuals come, and it'll go to a facility.
And Ted, I was not accusing you whatsoever of doing that. That was more just
idea,
trying
though.
to move forward.
Okay. All right, I guess if there's nothing else, let's open it up to the public. Again, you can raise your hand and Rich will recognize you. If you don't know how to use the raise your hand button on your computer, certainly just speak out, state your name and your address, and we'll recognize you, okay? Any comments from anybody else?
Deb Gersher has her hand up.
Okay, go ahead, Deb.
Hi, can you folks hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, great, thank you. So my questions kind of go in a couple of different areas. The first one is regarding the fire department access to the housing development that's planned. So one of the questions I had was, the property is fairly steep in terms of grade. And has the fire chief actually walked the property to get a feeling about how steep it is to get up to the property? Because what I'm thinking is, I wonder if all the fire department apparatus can actually get up the hill to do a structural firefighting. Does anybody have an answer to that question?
I can answer that, Mr. Chairman, if that's okay.
Sure, go ahead.
The road configuration, basically, except for the first 50 feet or first 100 feet, hasn't changed from the 84 lot development plan. And that was extensively reviewed by the fire department. So basically the 84 lot plan and the 44 lot plan, the road configuration's almost identical. And the 84 lot plan was fully reviewed with all the grades, all the cut through sections, everything was fully engineered in that, and there were zero issues for the fire department. So,
Ted, would you have any problem if we just mentioned to the fire chief that if he has a moment on his way home, if he wouldn't mind driving up and just taking a peek?
absolutely, no, he's very welcome to see.
Okay.
But even what he sees out there won't reflect the final plans.
But it gives him an idea. You know, I think in reference he can talk to what grade a fire truck would have difficulty. Not that I think there is one, because there are many houses in Norfolk that are up on hills. But I think it might be worthwhile just giving him the opportunity.
Yeah. I'm also thinking that some of the roads in Norfolk, like even Pheasant Hill and stuff, have some pretty decent grades in the road structure that we have now.
Yeah, there'll be substantially worse roads than on that development when it's finished.
How about Hill Street?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, have you had some other questions?
I did. So the next question, I wanted to kind of go back to what Devin was saying, that he was very uncomfortable about the line sighting coming out of the development. So it's I just want to kind of recap some of the issues that we talked about at the previous zoning board. So as I mentioned, my husband Jim is actually a certified bus driver, and I wonder if you had plans that the school bus for the public schools was actually going to go up to development, turn around and come down the hill and pick up school children.
Ted, I think you had talked to the Holmeses. Do you want to answer that?
Yes, we had met the Holmes in, I believe, early December, and they reviewed, commented, made suggestions prior to the 84 lot subdivision roadway getting fully designed, and we incorporated their comments basically to suit the Holmes Bus Company so that they had zero issues, and we followed their several recommendations for that design.
So my understanding is the school buses will be going up the hill and turning around and coming to a stop to pick up the children. So this is something my husband Jim brought up as a person who's certified as a bus driver, that the taking a left out of the development is different with a school bus than it is actually an automobile. The acceleration rate is significantly diminished. So one of the things Devin was mentioning, that he was uncomfortable about the traffic pattern coming out of the development. And I was wondering if there's any possibility, if we still have room, to actually revisit the traffic study. Because one of the things is I would factor in not only look at automobiles, but school buses that have approximately half the acceleration rate and factor those in to determine whether or not they can pretty much outrun the oncoming traffic that's heading northbound on Secon Street. Because I can tell you, I'm actually working from the house for the past couple of days, and it just appears to me that the traffic is seasonal on that street. That is, the better the weather gets, the faster the speed increases. And as a taxpayer, I'm asking if we could revisit the traffic study, put in factors like school buses making a left, going southbound on Secon Street, trying to outrun northbound traffic, looking at the traffic patterns during the warm season, because it's my opinion as a taxpayer working from the house that I've experienced my fair share of drag racing up Secon Street the past few weeks. I don't know if it's a factor of people basically being at home more, but definitely the warmer weather, the faster the speed increases on that street. And I think Devin's really is right on the money about that the line sighting coming out of this development, especially taking a left. And as you know, all the parents that the kids miss the school buses, they're going to be flying down that hill and taking a left onto the oncoming traffic. So it's the school children, it's anybody who's going to ballet after school, anybody who's going to CCD, everybody with school children is going to be taking a left out of that development. It's only the people that are heading to the train station, maybe Walpole in the morning, they're going to be banging a right along with people accessing 128. But the majority of the families with school children coming down that hill are going to be taking a left. I mean, most of all of us have been through that before with our kids having to be someplace on time and just basically speeding to try to get there. The other thing is, I just want to mention too that traffic light that you're talking about is actually the telephone pole is right at the entrance of our driveway. And if somebody loses control of that car, especially during the bad weather, they're going to slam into that telephone pole. So that's something to think about from a public safety standpoint. And again, it's taking a left out of the development. So I think Devin's right on the money. I think we really need to look at the line sighting coming out of that development once again. And I'm asking as a taxpayer if we have any wiggle room to go ahead and do that.
Chris, do you want to respond?
Yeah, I'll just point out that all of those circumstances have been addressed at one point or another in the WSP memos. And all of the data before the board shows that the entrance is well within tolerances for school buses, trucks, and left turn, right turn, intersection sight distance, stopping sight distance at the appropriate design speed, with, as we discussed earlier, that case F as being the one situation, and that's not the left turn coming out of the site. So all of those circumstances that you've questioned have been evaluated by the peer review experts for both the developer and the town, and the information is available for review.
You with us, Deb?
I am.
Yeah. I think the consensus of the board has been we're not going to reopen the traffic study. I mean, we've believe it or not, the traffic study on this project is probably went on and was much more in depth than any traffic study the board has done on any project in the town, and for good reason, because of the traffic concerns. But I really think that, again, with the reductions and with the level of review at the 40 miles an hour and at 38.5 miles an hour, these items have been satisfied.
Chris, is there going to be any review again of the traffic studies if the board grants a permit for this project, conditional permit? Is the traffic going to be revisited again, the traffic pattern?
No, not that I'm aware of.
as a taxpayer, I'm really suggesting that you revisit this, because one fatality is one fatality too many. And as I said before, the northbound side, on the Medfield side, there was a fatality of a high school kid there a couple of years ago. So, I mean, I really think that the speed that's experienced on that street, if you take away the highs and the lows, I'm worried about the high side. People going over 40 miles an hour on that street.
Okay. All right. You have some more items?
No, that's it for tonight.
Okay. Okay. I will, I'm gonna follow up with the police chief on some of your concerns, and at the next meeting, Deb, I'll revisit this a little bit with you, okay?
Thank you.
Okay.
And Chris, the speed controls and things that are being put in here, plus the mitigations, are all very important to what's going to make this a better, addressing the issues that are being mentioned here. We got to make sure those all go in.
Yeah, they are in.
Right, and that's one step up to what's going to, take care of some of these concerns. We can't stop somebody who wants to drive 80 miles an hour down a road for some reason, but, the controls are there to stop a lot of people from doing what they shouldn't be doing.
That becomes an enforcement issue if obviously we have speeders on the road. So we will, we'll address it. Any other abutters concerns? Could you raise your hand, or you can speak up if you can't find the raise your hand button? Amy, are you seeing anybody? Amy, you're muted.
I see Karen Clark out there.
Yeah, Karen Clark.
Yep, Karen, you're all set.
Thanks,
Go
Amy.
ahead. Go ahead, Karen.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Chairman, I just want to send my support to Ms. Gersh's concerns and Mr. Devon Howe's concerns. I believe when the traffic study was done, the equipment to actually check the speed of cars was, I think it's a strip that goes in the road. It actually was put at the corner as opposed to a straightaway area, northbound coming from Medfield or southbound coming from Norfolk Center. So I agree with Ms. Gersha that some kind of traffic study needs to be revisited. And I agree with Mr. Howe in that the fact that the site distance was never really resolved remains an issue. And God forbid a busload of children come down to take a left to go to the schools. And as Ms. Gersha explained, they can't accelerate at the rate a car can to miss a car coming from the center of Norfolk towards Medfield. So I just want to reiterate that. And again, as a taxpayer, I think we need to find that money, and we need to eliminate that issue, because as Mr. Howe shared with his board members and the people in the audience, it doesn't matter if the development is 84 units or 44 units. If traffic entrance and exit from the development is unsafe, we need to address it. I did want to ask the developers if there will be any blasting that occurs on the site.
Ted?
We're not exactly sure yet, but it's possible. But if there is blasting, there's a full set of conditions. Attorney Hill briefly covered some of them tonight, but there's all kinds of restrictions and limits imposed upon us as developers if there is blasting undertaken.
At a past meeting, Mr. Howe noted that there was a very tall wall behind the rear property of 130 Secon Street. That's my property. Does that wall still exist in your plans?
I'm going to say that it probably doesn't, because with the less density, the units are completely spaced much differently, and there's a lot more room. So we're trying to avoid having any walls over probably 5 or 6 feet. Should be the highest walls.
Because behind basically from 130 down towards Tris Carpenter's property, is the area where the condos will be.
Yeah.
And I don't believe there was any significant change made to construction nor the number of condos in that region. So I just want to confirm that I'm not going to have a 20-foot wall behind my property.
I can confirm there'll be no wall higher than 6 feet anywhere on the property.
Okay, and that can be written into conditions?
Yep.
Okay, because first we said 2 or 3 feet, now we're up to 6.
I believe 6 feet, over 6 feet requires fencing, so, and under 6 feet doesn't. So that's like a good.
Okay, I guess that brings up another topic from something that my neighbor mentioned. Some of the properties beyond me don't have a hill behind them, they're flat. Will there be fencing behind those properties to protect them from, children playing, the normal kind of stuff you'd expect in a neighborhood?
I would expect there's some kind of small garden fencing at most of the properties.
At the rear property lines?
I would expect there will be some kind of fencing on most of the properties.
Again, is it the rear property line?
We haven't actually got into that much detail yet, Mrs. Clark.
Okay, I guess because we're talking about conditions tonight, I thought it was something important to bring up.
I guess, Karen, are you asking for a fence to separate this property from all your property, the abutters properties? Is that what you're asking for?
Well, personally, I don't think I'm going to need a fence. I think the old plan showed, and perhaps Devin can weigh in on this, but I remember the old plans showed a really substantial sized wall behind 130 Secon Street. And then if you go further down Secon Street towards the center, the hill is less in height, but still abuts property owners.
Yeah, I'm looking at the plan right now, and the wall you're referring to, and I see your property there at 130, was previously behind units 70 and 69. And that area, at least on the schematic plan, is being shown as undisturbed. So we were able to pull those units pretty far away from the property line. I don't know if, Amy, you have the 44 unit yield plan up?
Rich is doing the plans.
It's the schematic. It's called the 44 unit yield plan. It's the one that we had up as the revised plan the last hearing. But I think generally the answer is that we have, the whole point is that we've lessened the density and pulled structures away from areas that require significant grading or significant retaining walls, because now that we've reduced the density, we have to try to reduce the cost to build it. And if you're pushing units all the way up against the property line and severe slopes, then you come up with retaining walls. And the whole point of going to 44 was to reduce and eliminate those to the extent we can. So
there's basically no retaining wall, just a wooded area.
That's what I'm looking at in this yield plan. Ted, I don't know if
there may be small retaining walls now, but there'll be no more than 6 feet anywhere on the site.
Okay. All right, good to know. And just to throw my 2 cents in again for Devin, I think it is important to preserve that natural area that we know has wetlands and potential vernal pools, and to recommend that the town does apply for a perpetual conservation restriction. I know the applicant says it's going to take a great deal of time, et cetera, but I think it's time well spent. I think it's important to protect those wetlands, and that's kind of been, the crux of this whole development from the get-go, was the fact that we do have some sensitive wetlands out back that the wildlife depend on, and I think it's important to conserve them. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. And, all right, good.
So there was a chat question from Mike Kozakowski. He was wondering about a detailed plan for the 45,000 cubic yards of material being removed. Will it be immediately removed? Will some of it be buried on site? So if you.
That should be presented during the construction management plan that we'll submit to the town.
So prior to any soil being removed, their construction management plan will identify.
Yeah, Dan's conditions address that issue.
Yeah.
Right, it'll be addressed prior to any shovelful ever leaving. Anything else in the chat room, Amy?
I'm not seeing anything else. No more hands, no more messages.
Okay. Sue, I know you're with us tonight. Did you see anything with the affordable housing? I know it's somewhat boilerplate. Anything there that concerned you or with regard to conditions?
Look good.
Okay. Any other concerns? I think obviously, and to Deb and to Karen and probably Ted, Chris, and Dan and I are going to have, one second, are going to have to do, sorry, going to have to do a little chatting about this traffic plan and some of these concerns, but we can, I think we
I
can
do have
talk,
a question.
we could talk about that offline. Go ahead. Is that Trish Carpenter?
Yeah, I have a question.
Okay, sure, go.
I carry on from Mrs. Clark's comments. As you go from my property towards hers, the property next to mine and my property do not have a large hill separating them from this development. And Mr. O'Hart indicated that he would very possibly have a fence that went through there, nothing more than 6 feet. I'd like to see that in the conditions, that the properties are separated, that it isn't just open woodland, that kids and people could roam into and do whatever they do in the woods.
Trish, can I ask you, can you just elaborate a little bit on that? Because I'm envisioning one person has a fence behind there, another person doesn't have a fence. Can you?
Well, Mrs. Clark's property.
And where I'm coming from is looking at that property, and I think I know where your property is, and the abutters is, are we going to have some people with fences behind there? I can understand the abutters on the side of the Cullens having a fence as people enter and exit the property. I'm just trying to get a sense of what your, are we talking about a chain link fence that separates abutters?
Very possibly, some sort of barrier. Understand the topography and the geography of Mrs. Clark's property and my property are totally different. She literally has a barrier hill behind her. I don't.
Okay.
If you've been there, you would know that.
Yeah, I do. I'm trying to understand.
I can walk right onto that property and, 300 feet, 400 feet.
So are you looking for, I guess the question is, are you asking for a fence abutting your?
I think one would be appropriate.
Okay. Could you put together an idea? I mean, the Cullens have been very specific as to what they'd like to see. Can you put together something of what you'd like to see for your property? You can send it through the zoning office, or you can send it directly to my email, and I'll forward it to the applicant, and we can we'll add it. We'll discuss it and make it part of the conditions for the next time.
Sure.
Okay. That'd be great.
That's fine. That's fine.
Good.
Ted, is that something you might be able to address with Mr. Carpenter directly? Because I think it might be worth a discussion.
I'll go through the zoning.
Excuse me?
I'll go through the zoning.
Okay, I just, I'm trying to make sure that you get to the right point, because sometimes, in discussions about putting up a fence, there are other alternatives that you might not consider, absent a full conversation, and you might end up with a fence that doesn't necessarily accomplish the goal. But if you want to go through the zoning board's office, I'm sure that's fine.
Ted, do you have any issue with that?
No, I'll wait until I get some direction from you, Mr. Chairman, and you can tell me how to proceed.
Chris? Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Could I just ask that any emails go through the office, please?
Oh, of
Absolutely.
course. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, yep. Anybody else have a question? Anybody else?
Nope, I don't see anybody. And Mr. Kozakowski says he's all set. I don't see any other hands up.
Okay, good. All right. So again, for our next meeting, Chris, you're going to put together, give us an updated list of waivers, correct? Chris,
Yes, we're working on that.
Okay, good. Devin, you're going to get the dam safety for the applicant, so we can include that into our conditions, correct?
Yeah, I already sent that to Dan.
Oh, you did? Dan, you've got that. And Dan, you're going to update the, obviously you're going to update the conditions. We're going to have to include the Cullens. We're going to have to include, we've got to do a little bit of discussion amongst us with regard to this, the traffic issue again. Mr. Carpenter is going to give us a detail that he might like to see on his property. And Karen, if there's anything, I think you've already stated that you want to have at least a condition in there stating that there will not be any wall larger than 6 feet abutting your property. So Dan, I think you've got that wording for the conditions.
Yeah, is there to be a wall abutting her property? Is that the issue?
If there is a wall, that it would be no higher than 6 feet.
Okay.
Is that correct? I think that's what you said, Ted, right?
Yes. Yeah, perfect.
Okay. We're going to check on the fees, obviously the affordable. I think we all agreed $10,000 in the fund for the peer reviews at this time. Anything I've missed, Dan, Chris?
No, I think it was a very productive meeting.
Okay. Yeah, we got a little bit of work to do. All right, Amy, I think this meet will be on for the 20th as well, correct? I think that's our next opening to continue this hearing, correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Anything from any board members before we? Nope.
No.
Okay. At this time, I ask for a motion to continue the public hearing till 7:15 on May 20th, 2020.
I so move.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, very good. Thank you very-
Everybody's unanimous?
Yes.
That was unanimous.
Aye.
Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good evening.
Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Chairman.
Oh, we got okay.
Wait, we have to adjourn the meeting, don't we?
Yep. We haven't adjourned our meeting, but we've adjourned that part.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Rich got rid of us all. I hope he didn't.
Oh, no.
Now we're here. Okay.
No.
All right.
Do we have minutes to go over?
We don't have any minutes to review, so could I have a motion to close the zoning board of appeals meeting for April 22nd?
Are you okay, Amy? We done for tonight?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep,
all right.
I'm all set.
So moved. I move that we close the meeting.
Thanks, Joe. Appreciate
All right.
that.
No, I heard Amy had raised the question. I didn't hear her question. Thank you.
All right.
All right, so I move that we close the meeting for tonight.
I'll
We have
second.
a second. Second to
I'll
close.
second.
All right, just so Amy can record it. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Aye.
Good evening, everybody. Stay safe.